Chapter 1917. Fortunately, Lao Tzu's willpower was strong. Otherwise, he would have fallen to the ground. He looked at Chang'an and the others in confusion. He was a little speechless. What does a woman's pregnancy have to do with Lao Tzu? He did not know if these guys heard him, but he wanted to find someone to confide in. He wanted to say that this had nothing to do with Lao Tzu. However, Chang'an revealed a meaningful smile and said, "This is a good thing. You have now become the child-giving guanyin. The people worship you." Speaking of this, he smiled slyly. "In the future, our family will worship you. Maybe you can give birth to our family." Ha. That's right. Our family will worship you too. Ha. Zhang Sunchong and Du Go also expressed their opinions and laughed loudly. There was nothing wrong with what they said, and there was even a trace of respect. However, in Zhang Feng's ears, it was slowly mocking. He clenched his fists and glared at the three. "You bastards dare to make fun of Lao Tzu. Take this." After saying that, he swung his fist and greeted them. The three of them had more or less injuries on their bodies. How could they withstand Zhang Feng's sudden attack? With a roll, they fell to the ground. Of course, Chang'an was not someone to be trifled with. How could he endure this kind of grievance? Lao Tzu painstakingly accompanied you to Shenzhou, and you still want to hit Lao Tzu? Naturally, he could not take this lying down. Even though his waist hurt, he still wrestled with Zhang Feng. Moreover, there was also Zhang Sunchong and Du Go. Soon, the four of them wrestled together and rolled on the ground. The passers-by saw that there was a show to watch and stopped to look. "Yo, where are these child beggars from? Why are they fighting on the street? Looking at their clothes, they should be from Chang. Look at the copper coins scattered on the ground. They should be fighting over the copper coins, right? This brother's words are reasonable, but these child beggars are really pitiful. Why don't you all be generous?" Everyone was discussing animatedly. Many of them felt pity for Zhang Feng and the others and even threw down copper coins. There were even many busybodies who clapped and cheered, afraid that the scene wasn't spectacular enough. Finally, the four people who were rolling on the ground noticed that something was wrong. They stopped fighting and looked at the crowd in confusion. However, these guys didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Instead, they started to point and whisper. "Why aren't you fighting anymore? Did Lao Tzu just pay? Continue, I'm about to place my bets." Upon hearing these words, Zhang Feng was instantly infuriated. He stood up abruptly and pointed at the crowd. "Get lost immediately. If you guys want to watch others fight, go see old Wang next door." Chang'an and the others could not stand it anymore. They trembled as they supported each other and scolded the busybodies. "You bastards, did you not have a mother to teach you? Later, Lao Tzu will lead the troops to kill you all." When the crowd heard this, they wanted to refute. However, when they saw the clothes of Zhang Feng and the others, they shook their heads and remained silent. These child beggars were actually boasting shamelessly here? It seemed that they had been beaten silly just now. They didn't seem very smart now. After thinking about it, there was no need to argue with these child beggars. Everyone flicked their sleeves and left. Seeing that everyone had left, Zhang Feng glanced at Chang'an and the others. He snorted coldly and walked toward the Zhang mansion. Chang'an was a little embarrassed. If he went home in this state, he would probably be scolded by his father. Then he would be hung up and beaten. He would say that he was ruining the family's reputation and insulting the Cheng family. Zhang Sun and Du Go were similar. Both of them were young masters of aristocratic families. If they went home in this state, they would be laughed at by others. How could they raise their heads in Chang and in the future? After thinking about it, the three of them decided not to go home. They followed Feng Zi to the Zhang mansion. This kid had brought them to Xingzhou. Now that he was in this state, he wanted to run away? No way. Therefore, the three of them followed Zhang Feng's footsteps and walked toward the Zhang mansion. Zhang Feng didn't care so much at first. He flicked his sleeves and walked forward. However, the more he walked, the more he felt that something was wrong. He realized that someone was following him. When he turned around, he saw that it was these three guys. Therefore, he stopped and looked at the three of them with a mocking expression. "Why are you three following Lao Tzu? Weren't you very good at beating Lao Tzu just now? Chengchumo was already unhappy. When he heard this, he pouted. Who said that Lao Tzu is following you? It's not like your family built this road. Tisk. Zhang Feng looked at him with disdain and turned to walk toward the Zhang mansion. He knew in his heart that these guys didn't dare to go home for the time being. They could only follow him. However, they were unwilling to admit defeat. However, was Lao Tzu someone who would admit defeat? If you want to follow, then follow. When we reach the Zhang mansion, let's see how Lao Tzu will deal with you. They didn't speak along the way. Finally, they arrived at the Zhang mansion. When he saw the plaque of the Zhang mansion, Zhang Feng instantly felt a sense of belonging to his home. A warm feeling arose in his heart. It was still that familiar place. It was still those familiar voices. He felt like crying. Lao Tzu had suffered so much outside. He was finally back. However, he still held it in. He couldn't drop the ball in front of these guys. He sorted out his emotions and strode toward the door. He thought that he would be able to eat braised meat, chicken drumsticks, and other delicacies soon. Chapter 1918. Just as he was immersed in his beautiful fantasy, a shout pulled him back to reality. Stop! Where did this child beggar come from? Why are you begging at the Zhang residence? Zhang Feng frowned. It was normal for people to call Lao Tzu a child beggar. After all, many of them had never seen him before. Why would someone call Lao Tzu a child beggar in the Zhang residence? Were they blind or did they take the wrong medicine? He stared at the source of the voice and saw two servants in the Zhang residence's uniform glaring at him arrogantly. This made him furious. He frowned and scolded, Are you blind? You don't even recognize Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is your master. Master? The two servants looked at each other in confusion. This was clearly a child beggar. How dare he say he was their master? How dare he? The leader of the servants stood out and took out a stick from his sleeve. He frowned and said, You dare to impersonate our master? Do you not know how to write the word death? Feng Zi almost fainted when he heard this. Not only did these people not recognize him, but they also dared to take out a stick? What were they trying to do? Beat Lao Tzu? Just as he was about to step forward, Chengchumo jumped out and pointed at the servant. He stared at him and said, Open your dog eyes and see clearly. Is this really your master? He did not want to help Feng Zi, but it was not good for him to just stand there. Moreover, if he was recognized by someone familiar, the Cheng family would lose face. However, the servant did not buy it. He only thought that these people were child beggars and started arguing again. Just like that, Chengchumo and the servant quarreled. Their voices could be heard throughout the Zhang residence. Not long after, the scolding attracted a large group of people from the Zhang residence. The leader was Du Ziding. He led a group of servants and walked out aggressively. Who is it? Who is impersonating our master? He stood at the door and glanced at the crowd, glaring angrily. When the servant saw the housekeeper come out, he quickly went forward and pointed at Zhang Feng. Housekeeper, it's him. He said he's the master. Du Ziding frowned and looked at Zhang Feng. Her first reaction was that a child beggar dared to cause trouble here. However, the more he looked at him, the more he felt that something was amiss. Why did this person look so much like master? This figure, this standing posture, this face shape, how could there be someone so similar in this world? Could this really be the master? However, on second thought, he felt that it was unlikely. Old Master had such a huge family business and was also the dean of White Deer College. How could he be dressed so shabbily? This person must have impersonated Master because he looked like him. Yes, that must be it. Having made up his mind, he waved his hand. Men. At this moment, Zhang Feng's face instantly darkened. Old Du, you bastard. Even you don't recognize Lao Tzu? Hearing this, Du Ziding felt goosebumps all over her body. This voice, why did it look so much like Master? Thinking about it, Du Ziding took another look at Zhang Feng's appearance. In an instant, her legs went weak and she almost fainted. That voice belonged to Master. Only Master would call him Old Du in Chang'an city. Only Master dared to call him that. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. He took a closer look and almost fainted. He looked exactly the same as old master. They were practically carved from the same mold. And this voice, this was a living example of old master. He could no longer remain calm. He came forward and looked at Zhang Feng. His voice trembled as he asked, "Master, are you really master? What do you think?" Zhang Fu waved his sleeves and stared at Du Ziting. Who else in Chang'an city dares to impersonate Lao Tzu? As soon as he said that, Du Ziting was sure that this was her master. Only master would speak to her like this. Only master could emit such a domineering aura. Therefore, he hurriedly cheered, "Master, it's master, master is back." Before he could finish his sentence, Zhang Feng hurriedly stepped forward and covered Du Ziting's mouth. He widened his eyes and said, "Do you want the whole mansion to know that Lao Tzu is like this?" Du Ziting's mouth was covered, so she didn't react for a long time. Her eyes kept rolling until she saw Zhang Feng's tattered clothes. She suddenly understood and quickly nodded to show that she understood. Zhang Feng let go and snorted. "Prepare hot water immediately." Du Ziting nodded and quickly waved her hand to dismiss the servants. Then she welcomed Zhang Feng into the mansion. Chang'an and the others saw Zhang Feng enter the mansion and quickly followed him. In the side hall, Du Ziting had already prepared hot water. Zhang Feng, Chang'an, and the others ran in quickly, as if they were afraid that others would see them. Du Ziting was guarding the door. She looked around vigilantly and looked around from time to time. However, at this moment, Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu ran over with small steps. The two girls seemed to know what was inside. They didn't care that Du Ziting was guarding the door and were ready to rush in. This frightened Du Ziting. She hurriedly stopped the two girls. "Ladies, you are..." Zhang Yuyao glanced inside and said impatiently, "I just heard that a few beggars entered the mansion. What's going on? I also heard that master is back." Chapter 1919. Du Ziting quickly shook her head and put her hands on the door frame. "Beggar? What beggar? Why don't I know? Master just came back, but he's taking a bath and changing clothes now." Zhang Yuyao frowned. Just now, she clearly heard a servant say that master and a few beggars came back. Why wasn't there anyone now? She unwillingly glanced inside, but she didn't see anything. Jingshu just smiled and didn't say anything, because she had already guessed the gist of it from Du Ziting's expression. Perhaps this master was the child beggar. Master was so prideful, how could he let the housekeeper say it? After thinking for a while, she pulled Zhang Yuyao. "Sister Yuyao, the housekeeper is right. Since master is back, let's go to the hall and wait. We'll see in a while." After saying that, she didn't care about Zhang Yuyao's reaction and pulled her to the hall. Zhang Yuyao was still confused. She looked back from time to time, but when she thought that Sister Jingshu's words were reasonable, she still walked to the hall. After a while, Zhang Feng finished washing up and walked to the hall. Zhang Yuyao rushed forward and hugged Zhang Feng, sobbing, "Prince Zhang, do you know how worried we were about you these past few days?" Jingshu actually also wanted to pour out her heart, but when she saw that there was no place for her, she could only stand there and cry in a low voice. "Yes, Prince Zhang, if you didn't come back, we sisters didn't know what to do." Facing the two women's cries, Zhang Feng was a little helpless. He wanted to ask Chang'an for help, but he saw this guy give him a look that said, "We're all men, we understand." So he gave up resisting and quickly persuaded, "Don't cry, aren't I back now? There are so many people watching, why don't you get up first?" Hearing this, Zhang Yuyao seemed to have realized something. She looked up and saw many pairs of eyes staring at her. She couldn't help but blush. She reluctantly left Zhang Feng's embrace and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. "Prince Zhang, why are you dressed like this? Was he injured? Have you been eating well recently?" Zhang Feng was about to answer, but Chang'an couldn't stand it anymore and interrupted, "Sister-in-law, can you stop being so lovey-dovey? Our teeth are aching. If you have the time, hurry up and prepare some food for us. We're starving to death." Zhang Yuyao blushed and turned to look at Chang'an, but she couldn't remember this person in her mind. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "This is?" "Aya." Zhang Sun impatiently waved his hand, "I'm Buggy, this is Tai Nyo, and this is De Bing. Sister-in-law, hurry up and prepare some food." Also, call a few doctors. Jing Shu suddenly understood and smiled. Please wait for a moment, I'll go and prepare. After that, she looked at Zhang Feng meaningfully and turned to leave. Although she also wanted to chat with Prince Zhang, it was obviously not the time. Seeing Jing Shu leave, Zhang Yuyao also bowed to everyone. Please wait here, I'll go and help Sister Jing Shu. Du Ziding was also tactful. She probably guessed that the master and the young masters had something to say, so she casually found an excuse and left. After the three of them left, the hall became much quieter. But soon, the silence was broken by Cheng Chumo. He looked at Zhang Feng and showed an expression that all men understood. Feng Zi, you're really lucky to have such a wife. If I, Tai Niu, had such a wife, I'd be willing to die. You still have the face to say that? Zhang Feng stared at Cheng Chumo and was a little angry. You dog, you really treated this place as your own home. If Lao Tzu didn't see that you were injured, he would have already cut off your arm. He was very angry that this guy was bossing him around in his own house. However, when he thought that this guy was still injured, he let it go. Moreover, this guy had helped him a little in Xingzhou. Otherwise, with his temper, he would have driven this guy out long ago. Cheng Chumo was a little disapproving. Feng Zi, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Our injuries are all because of you. If it weren't for your hot air balloon, how could we be injured? Yes, if it weren't for your stupid hot air balloon, how could we be like this? Zhang Sunchong and Du Go seemed to have found a topic to vent their anger on, and they glared at Zhang Feng. In fact, it would have been better if these guys didn't mention it. Once they mentioned the hot air balloon, Zhang Feng was puzzled. The hot air balloon was clearly fine in the sky, and there was no problem all the way to Xingzhou. Why did it deflate when it returned to Chang'an? Moreover, it deflated very quickly. Before they could react, it had already landed. It was a little strange. At that time, he was sleeping and didn't notice too many problems. It seemed that he could only ask these guys. Therefore, he tried to put on a smiling face. What happened to the hot air balloon just now? Why did it deflate? You want to know? Cheng Chumo revealed a malicious smile. Seeing Zhang Feng nod, he joked, I won't tell you. Who told you to hit Lao Tzu? Just now, he was quite good at hitting Lao Tzu. Now he wanted to fish for information? Impossible. Chapter 1920. Zhang Sun also acted as if he was watching a good show. If you want to know, you'll have to reward us later. Zhang Feng narrowed his eyes. He already knew that they didn't have good intentions. Sure enough, they were waiting for him here. However, was he someone who would admit defeat? He coldly snorted, I'll naturally treat you to good food and drinks later. However, you must immediately tell me everything that happened on the hot air balloon. Otherwise, Lao Tzu will immediately ask the Zhang residence's people to spread your scandal. At that time, let's see if you can still be so arrogant. Upon hearing this, Cheng Chumo's expression immediately changed. He was most afraid of his father. If his father knew that he had become a child beggar, wouldn't he be beaten to death? He quickly begged for mercy. I said, please don't spread it. We are also people who care about our reputation. Yes. It won't do you any good to spread it. Du Go was also afraid. His family was very strict and was not inferior to the imperial family. If his father knew, he would lose a layer of skin. However, Zhang Feng was happy. He thought to himself, since these guys are so afraid, then Lao Tzu will have something to use against me in the future. Sigh, why say again? He couldn't care less. He smiled, then quickly tell me. Originally, this smile didn't mean anything. However, in everyone's eyes, it was like a death knell. It harbored evil intentions and made people afraid. Cheng Chumo could only say, just now, when we were in the sky, I heard the sound of air leaking. At that time, you were sleeping, so naturally you didn't have any reaction. I saw the hemp rope slowly breaking free from the sound of air leaking. Then, as he spoke, he spread out his hands, then it became like this. After hearing this, Zhang Feng frowned. Originally, the hot air balloon this time wasn't very perfect. It could be said that it was the first generation. The previous ones were just experimental products. Even if it was the first generation, this time it was relatively successful. It was just that there was a leak just now. The leak should be because the seal wasn't tight enough, which allowed the hydrogen to leak out. It seemed that he had to find another way to seal the air vent tightly. Also, the direction of the hot air balloon this time was completely driven by the wind. He had to find a way to control the direction in the air. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous. This time, it had drifted to Xingzhou. Who knew where it would go next time? Now that he knew about this weakness, he had to find the time to reinvent it. However, this was obviously not the time to talk about this. Thus, he glanced at everyone. Alright, I understand. This will definitely not happen again. Just as he finished speaking, Du Ziding and the two girls walked in together. Prince Zhang, the bathwater is ready. Jing Shu blushed and looked at Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng nodded and glanced at Cheng Chumo and the others. Let's go and take a bath. After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the room. Cheng Chumo and the others followed closely behind. The shower was soon over, and the four of them changed into new clothes. At this time, the doctor was already waiting in the hall. The doctor picked up Cheng Chumo's arm and carefully examined it. His brows were sometimes knitted and sometimes relaxed. He didn't know what was going on. After about half an incense stick's time, the doctor let go of the arm and stroked his beard. The problem is neither big nor small. It's just that the lumbar bone is damaged. Wait for old man to prescribe some medicine. Take it first. I don't know if it's useful or not. Take it first. After saying that, the doctor didn't explain. He took out a pen and paper, and a dragon and snake flew around. However, Cheng Chumo panicked. Hearing the doctor's words, it seemed that he couldn't be saved. He hurriedly asked, but the doctor excused himself by saying that his medical skills were not good enough. After that, he took the pulse of Zhang Sunchong and Du Go. The conclusion was basically the same. The lumbar bone was damaged and needed to be recuperated. They couldn't stay calm anymore. They were about to ask the doctor, but unexpectedly, the guy ran away like a wisp of smoke. Cheng Chumo held the prescription in his hand and wanted to cry. It wasn't because of the doctor's words. After all, there weren't many in the Qing family who were afraid of death. The injury on his waist wasn't fatal. It was because the doctor told him to avoid spicy food, avoid this and that. Most importantly, he couldn't touch women. Otherwise, the injury on his waist would worsen. How could he, one of the Chang and four tyrants, endure this? However, he couldn't ignore the doctor's words. Therefore, he decided to vent his anger on Zhang Feng. Feng Zi, you mother****. Lao Tzu is like this now because of you. That bullshit doctor told Lao Tzu to avoid this and that and not to touch women. What do you think we should do? Zhang Sunchong also stood up and looked at Zhang Feng condescendingly. Lao Tzu's favorite drumstick is going to leave me. How are you going to compensate me? Du Go was naturally unwilling. He pointed at Zhang Feng and also attacked him. It was as if he didn't care about his back pain at all. As for Zhang Feng, he sat on the stool with a cigarette in his right hand. From time to time, he would take a puff. He was very satisfied. He was currently immersed in the stimulation of the cigarette and had no intention of replying to the three of them. Moreover, he could understand what the three of them said. After all, an injury wasn't a small matter. Moreover, it was an injury on his waist. That was even more so he didn't choose to refute. Moreover, what was the use of refuting? These three guys were more vicious than dogs. He had no chance of winning. Chapter 1921. When Cheng Chumo saw that Zhang Feng didn't respond, he became even fiercer. He gritted his teeth and said, Feng Zi, don't King think you can just keep quiet. If Lao Tzu can't touch women, how can he carry on the family line in the future? At this point, his expression changed and he actually wanted to cry. That's not the most important thing. Lao Tzu can't eat barbecue or drink in the future. What should we do? Obviously, eating and drinking were his first priority, and carrying on the family line was second. Would old Xing beat him to death if he heard this? Du Go also had a bitter expression. Thinking that he wouldn't be able to eat what he wanted to eat in the future, he held back his tears and complained, my drumstick, my duck neck, my stop ***king quarreling. Zhang Feng suddenly stood up and interrupted the noise. He took a deep puff of his cigarette and spat out the smoke. he glanced at the crowd and scolded, "Look at you guys. You're the King 4 hegemons of Chang. Isn't it just a little injury on your waist? It's not like you broke your waist. That doctor just now was obviously a quack. I'll personally find a few good doctors for you. For the next few days, you can eat and drink as much as you want. As long as you don't die, I can pull you back from the gates of hell. These are my words and no one can stop me." He wasn't bragging. He had a certain status in Chang'an, so it was relatively easy for him to find some good doctors. In addition to the connections of his teachers, there was no doctor in the Tang dynasty that he couldn't find. Of course, that immortal son Simiao might not be easy to find, but ordinary doctors weren't a problem. After hearing Zhang Feng's words, the three of them felt reassured. However, there was still a trace of concern in their hearts. "You're not lying to us, right?" Zhang Feng took a deep puff of his cigarette and waved his hand. "Think about it. With your IQ, do you think I can lie to you?" The three of them nodded and secretly agreed. Indeed, there were three of them, and this guy was only one person. How could he lie to them? After lying to himself for a while, Chengchumo said, "Then let's cut the crap and serve the hot pot. Lao Tzu is already hungry." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at the guy and said to Du Ziting, "Old Du, serve the hot pot." Du Ziting accepted the order and left. After a while, the servants brought in all kinds of ingredients. This made Chengchumo and the other two drool. Back then, when they were on the hot air balloon, they had nothing. When they finally found a few steamed buns, the four of them had to share them. This was the consequence of not bringing food. Of course, Zhang Feng did not think of this at that time. He thought that the hot air balloon would not float too far. Who would have thought that it would go to Xingzhou? Without saying anything more, everyone set up a fire and began to feed them. Not long after, the ingredients were cooked. Chengchumo and the others wolfed down the food. But this was hot pot. How could he eat it like that? The three of them were scalded to the point that they could only stick out their tongues. After a sumptuous feast, the four of them sat on the chairs and each lit a cigarette to enjoy the peace and quiet. Before they finished smoking, Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao walked in. "Prince Zhang, greetings." The two women bowed to everyone. Seeing this, Zhang Feng straightened his clothes and quickly sat up. After all, this would damage his image, especially in front of the two women. Then, he said seriously, "What's wrong?" Jingshu stepped forward and bowed. "Since Prince Zhang is back, when will you go to Shao Mountain to visit the gentleman?" This time, they were here to remind young Master Zhang to go to Shao Mountain. After all, the teachers had worked hard for young Master Zhang. It was said that their white hair had increased a lot. Now that they were back, if they didn't go and see the teachers, they would definitely be criticized by others. Although this was not important to others, it was extremely important to the Zhang residents because it was related to the reputation and direction of the Zhang residents. They could not be careless. As the future mistress of the Zhang residents, they naturally had to remind him. Zhang Feng naturally knew this in his heart. It was just that he had just returned and did not think about it. Now that he was suddenly reminded, he felt a little unnatural. This was his master, and he actually needed the two girls to remind him. He really should not have done that. After blaming himself, he said with a serious face, "Indeed, what you said is reasonable. I was not here for a few days, so my master must be very busy. I should pay him a visit." As he spoke, he raised his head and glanced outside the door. Seeing that the sun was setting in the west, he changed the topic. "It's already late. Let's go tomorrow morning. Send someone to Shao Mountain to pass on a message that I'm back." Jingshu thought for a moment and felt that Prince Zhang's words were reasonable. She bowed. "Yes, young master." "What? Is there anything else?" Seeing that the two women did not leave, Zhang Feng could not help but ask. Jingshu nodded and continued, "A few days ago, Madame Xie came and brought a lot of dried flowers." "Madame Xie?" Zhang Feng thought about this name carefully and asked, "How many dried flowers did she bring? Did she report it? Did she pay?" He had previously made an agreement with this Madame Xie. As long as he did not ask, she would continue to send flowers. This could be considered as secretly helping the Xie family. Chapter 1922. Moreover, the dried flowers were related to perfume, And perfume was a new product. He dared not be careless. Jingshu also knew the importance of the matter. She took out an account book from her sleeve and handed it to Zhang Feng. "Young master, this is the account book. There are a total of 30 stones." Zhang Feng took the account book and looked at it carefully. Seeing that there was no problem, he closed the account book and handed it back to Jingshu. "Well, there is no problem. Tell old Du to take good care of the dried flowers. I will have great use for them in the future." Jingshu nodded. She seemed to have thought of something and said, "A few days ago, Mr. Zihuai also came. He brought some news. He said that the teachers of the academy sent some servants to Shenzhou in order to find you." Hearing this, Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a little touched. The teachers on the mountain really treated him well. They really did help him when he needed them, especially the old Xiozai. Although he usually did not show it, he knew that he was the one who cared about him the most. The old Xiozai was usually lonely and had no one to rely on. Since he met him, he even treated him like a nephew. This kind of feeling could not be understood by others. Only he knew. Thinking of this, the corners of his eyes became wet. Zhang Yuyao seemed to have noticed something. She quickly took a handkerchief from the ground and said, "Prince Zhang, don't be sad." "Who said I was sad?" Zhang Feng tilted his head. He was not convinced. How could a man cry in front of a woman? So he waved his sleeve and wiped the corners of his eyes. He tried to be brave and said, "See, I said I am fine. You don't have to say anything." He thought that he had covered up all of this well. However, he did not know that the two women saw through all of this. They looked at each other and giggled. "Okay, don't laugh." Zhang Feng waved his hand. He felt that his face was a little hot. "Keep laughing and see how I will deal with you in the future." As soon as he finished speaking, the two women reluctantly agreed and waved their hands before leaving the room. After the two women left, Zhang Feng felt that someone was looking at him strangely. When he turned around, he saw Cheng Chumo and the others smiling slyly. He was a little stupid. It was one thing for women to laugh at Lao Tzu, but they actually dared to laugh too? He stood up abruptly, pointed at the crowd, and said angrily, "What are you bastards laughing at?" "Nothing, nothing." The three of them shivered and hurriedly waved their hands. Just now, they had seen everything with their own eyes. They had no choice but to laugh. Who would have thought that a grown man would be like this? However, this fellow seemed to not allow others to laugh. He was even fiercer than a dog. Naturally, they didn't dare to say anything. Zhang Feng knew in his heart what these bastards were laughing at. However, if they did not want to admit it, there was nothing he could do. He could only scold. "If Lao Tzu sees you laughing in the Zhang mansion in the future, Lao Tzu will spread your scandal throughout Chang'an city." After saying that, he waved his sleeves and turned around to leave. Only the dumbfounded crowd was left in the room. This was too domineering, wasn't it? He didn't allow them to laugh? However, after thinking about it, they were in the Zhang mansion and they were still injured. They could only endure it and teach this bastard a lesson in the future. Therefore, the three of them decided to swallow their anger. Without anyone to vent their anger, they could only find a guest room to rest. It was night. The sky was gray and not a single star could be seen. However, the Zhang mansion was brightly lit. The flames swayed under the veil as if they were cheering for the return of the owner. The night gradually deepened. Small snowflakes began to float in the sky. Slowly, the snowflakes became bigger and bigger. The houses, flowers, and trees were all covered in a snowy white. The entire Zhang mansion became a world of silver and white. The servant on night patrol was holding a lantern with his hands tucked into his sleeves. From time to time, he would shiver. When he stepped on the ground, creaking sounds could be heard from time to time. Behind him, there would always be a string of beautiful footprints. The wind blew gently, and the snow on the branches rustled and fell. The snowflakes danced in the wind like jade shavings. Winter in Guangzhou was like this. It was dry and cold. Once it started to get cold, it would make one's nose ache and head ache. Their feet were like 2 blocks of ice. Fortunately, everyone had fallen asleep. Tomorrow, they would be able to re-examine this snow-white world. The next day, with the crowing of roosters, the courtyard of the Zhang mansion was busy again. The servants needed to shovel the snow in the courtyard. Otherwise, it would be a big deal if a noble got up and fell. In the backyard, the Zhang mansion was woken up by the housekeeper. After washing up, he hurriedly ate breakfast and gathered in the main hall. He had important matters to attend to today. Thus, he had to explain to everyone in the main hall. He scanned the crowd and found that Chang'an and the others were not present. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Where are Tai Niu and the others?" Du Ziding took a step forward and said awkwardly, "Master, the 3 young masters are still sleeping. These 3 pigs only know how to sleep all day." Zhang Feng secretly spat. He was a little angry, but after thinking about it, he realized that going up the mountain to see his teacher had nothing to do with them, so he felt relieved. He then said with a serious face, "Old Du, how is the gift that I prepared for my teacher?" Chapter 1923. Yesterday, he told Du Ziding that he would go to Mount Shao today to visit his teachers, so he needed to prepare some gifts. At first, he felt strange to prepare gifts. Mount Shao was his own place, and he had to give gifts when he went back. But on second thought, his teachers had been busy these days, and if he didn't prepare something, he would feel that he didn't value them. After thinking about it, he decided to prepare something. After all, there was no harm in being prepared. Du Ziding also knew the importance of this matter. She pointed to the gift boxes on the table and said, "Master, according to your instructions, each gift box contains old ginseng, tea leaves, and wine. There is no problem." Zhang Feng nodded. He knew that his teachers were experts who were not greedy for gold, silver, and jade, so he could only use these to cater to their liking. He hoped that they would like it. After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the door. But at this time, Jingshu grabbed Zhang Feng and pleaded, "Prince Zhang, let us sisters go with you." "Yes, Prince Zhang, we also want to go," Zhang Yuyao also said with a hopeful look. This made Zhang Feng confused. He asked, "I'm going to see my teachers. What are you going to do?" "And I will be back soon." Jingshu shook her head and said with a bitter face, "Prince Zhang, you don't know how we sisters survived when you were not here. We were worried that you would not come back after leaving. We have been looking forward to it for a long time, but you finally came back. Now that you are leaving, please take us with you. We were really worried that you would not come back." Zhang Feng looked at the 2 women affectionately. He didn't expect that the 2 women had such deep feelings for him and were so worried about him. If he didn't take them with him now, he felt a little wrong. He had to say, "Okay, then let's go together." Hearing this, the 2 women were overjoyed. Du Ziding stood on the side and smiled without saying anything. Young people, she could understand. The carriage had been waiting outside for a long time. The group of people boarded the carriage and set off for Shao Mountain. This time, he didn't bring too many people, only Zhang Yuyao, Jingshu, and 5 servants. Because this was considered paying a visit to his master and thanking him for his kindness, there was no need for extravagance. Naturally, he didn't need to bring too many people. Soon they arrived at Shao Mountain. The carriage stopped at the entrance of the academy. Zhang Feng poked his head out and felt a familiar smell. It was the smell of the mountains, mixed with the fragrance of countless flowers and trees. Even though it was winter and everything had withered, the academy was still thriving. This was the strength of the students. Wherever they were, it would always be filled with the aura of youth. After enjoying the wonderful feeling, he was about to get out of the car when he heard a series of exclamations. "Dean, the dean is back." Zhang Feng looked in the direction of the voice and saw a group of students calling him. There were quite a few of them, and there were some familiar faces among them, including Yun Ping, Xiu Ran, and the others. This made him a little confused. Why were there so many students here? Were they here to welcome him? Thinking of this, he was overjoyed. He tidied his clothes and walked out of the carriage. He smiled at the crowd and said, "Why are you all here?" Yun Ping stepped forward, scratched his head, and smiled. "I know the dean is coming back today, so I came here to wait for you." "Waiting for me?" Zhang Feng was a little surprised. Even though he knew that these students were here to welcome him, he couldn't help but be surprised. However, he still had to put on a show to avoid disappointing them. Therefore, he said with a happy face, "I didn't expect you to be so considerate. You didn't waste my usual teaching." At this time, he didn't forget to brag about himself. The students were obviously happy to hear this. They smiled and felt a little embarrassed. After a round of laughter, Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd. Let's go into the academy. You must be waiting for a long time, right? Qiu Ran nodded. You are already waiting for us at the dean's residence. After saying that, he took the initiative to step back. The students also stepped aside and made a path for Zhang Feng. The carriage slowly pulled behind them and drove towards the academy. After a while, the group of people arrived at the residence. The students dispersed, leaving only Zhang Feng and the others. Zhang Feng helped the two women out of the carriage and walked towards the residence. As soon as he opened the door, he saw the 4 teachers and the old elementary scholar sitting on the stool, not saying a word. Zhang Feng greeted them with a happy face. He bowed to his teachers one by one. Hello, teachers. He originally thought that his teachers would be very happy when he came back and then invite him to have a candlelight talk. However, something unexpected happened. Chang'an shot to his feet and glared at her coldly. You still remember to come back? Zhang Feng was stunned. He thought that his teacher would be very happy. Why was he so angry? He didn't dare to answer. He quickly looked at the other teachers, wanting to ask for help. However, the other teachers were still sitting and looking at him coldly. It was as if they took everything for granted. Even the old elementary scholar was the same. What's wrong with these teachers? Chapter 1924. Why was he angry with him? Just as he was racking his brains, the old scholar stepped forward and said with disappointment, Where did you go this time? Be honest and explain everything clearly. Zhang Feng frowned. He probably knew why his teacher was angry. When he was about to answer, Jing Shu stood up. She bowed to the gentleman and said, Gentlemen, Prince Zhang just came back. He is still injured. Can you let him sit down and talk? Injured? Chang'an glanced at Zhang Feng. He was a little moved. In fact, he didn't mean to reprimand the student. In general, Feng Zi did everything well. However, this incident made them very angry. A dean of the academy actually went to the war-torn Xingzhou? Wasn't he worried about his own safety? Thinking of this, his eyes became cold again. Even if he is injured, let him stand. But, do you want to intercede for him? Jing Shu frowned and was a little dissatisfied. She didn't expect these gentlemen to be so strict. However, she didn't dare to refute and said, I don't dare. Zhang Feng saw that the atmosphere was a little tense. He turned his head and glanced at the two girls. He said, You two leave. Our teachers have something to say to me. You shouldn't stay here. Letting the two girls leave was for everyone's good. If the teachers scolded him later, it would be embarrassing. Zhang Yuyao was a little unwilling and pouted. She was very worried about Prince Zhang. Moreover, she had heard of these gentlemen's reputation. They were famous for being strict. This time, Prince Zhang would inevitably be reprimanded for doing such a thing. Jing Shu was obviously more sensible. Looking at the situation, she knew that she couldn't help much even if she stayed. She quickly pulled Zhang Yuyao and left in a hurry. Seeing the two girls leave, Zhang Feng bowed again. Dear teachers, I know that I did something wrong this time. Please punish me. It was better to admit his mistake first than to ask. Maybe the teacher's punishment would be lighter later. However, he was wrong. The atmosphere in the arena did not ease because of his apology. Chang'an waved his sleeves and said coldly, As the saying goes, a gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. Do you understand this principle? Zhang Feng shuddered. He had never seen his teacher lose his temper like this. Moreover, it was directed at him. It seemed that he was really angry this time. He could only tremble as he said, replying to teacher, This student understands. Since you know, why do you want to take the risk yourself? Xueji stood up, pointed at Zhang Feng and scolded him. Do you know what you're shouldering? You might not know, but today, old man will tell you. Speaking of this, he looked up at the roof and then at Zhang Feng. You are shouldering the hopes of us old guys, the academy, and even the entire Tang dynasty. How can you put yourself in danger? What if something happens? Zhang Feng was stunned. He did not expect his teacher to have such high expectations of him. And the academy and the entire Tang dynasty? This was a bit exaggerated, wasn't it? He could not afford it. However, in such a serious situation, he had to bow and say, "Yes, teacher." "Well, I finished my lecture. Let him tell us what happened this time." Chu Suiliang glanced at the crowd, then looked at Zhang Feng and said coldly, "Hurry up and tell us what happened this time." Zhang Feng nodded and thought for a while before he said, "The cause of this time is that I studied something that can go up to the sky. I called it a hot air balloon. Then I flew all the way to Chang'an in the hot air balloon. Originally, I did not plan to go to Shenzhou, but at that time, the hot air balloon was a little out of control, so I flew all the way to Shenzhou. Since I arrived in Shenzhou and there were Turks stationed there, I wanted to give them a blow, lest they come to the Tang dynasty and loot. This is also a temporary solution for the people of the Tang dynasty." His words were half true and half false. The main purpose was to calm down the anger of his teachers. Obviously, the effect was achieved. Yu Shinan stroked his beard and asked curiously, "Is your hot air balloon so magical? Can it really go up to the sky?" "Of course." Zhang Feng was excited and a trace of pride flashed in his eyes. "At that time, we took the hot air balloon to Xingzhou. If you are interested, you can have a try in a few days." "Well?" Yu Shinan's eyes lit up. "We can have a try, too?" As soon as he finished speaking, he felt something was wrong. It seemed that he had been fooled by this guy. He quickly waved his sleeve and said, "Don't try to divert old man's attention. Now we are talking about your private trip to Xingzhou. Don't talk about those useless things." Seeing that his purpose had been achieved, Zhang Feng did not care. He nodded and said, "Yes, you can reprimand me. I know that I have sinned deeply this time. No matter what punishment you give me, I am willing to accept it." He knew that his teachers were just angry that he went to Xingzhou. As long as he took the initiative to admit his mistake, he believed that his teachers would not be too angry. Chapter 1925. Sure enough, this method seemed to be effective. Yu Shinan waved his sleeves, not knowing what to say. He sat on the side and angrily drank his tea. The old scholar stared at Zhang Feng and said earnestly, "Feng Zi, we are not angry at you for tinkering with these strange things. We are angry at you for putting yourself in danger. Even if you want to serve the country, can't you let someone else do it? Why do you have to go yourself? You should know that the son of a rich family should not sit under the eaves." Zhang Feng hurriedly bowed and said with a sincere face, "What the teachers say is reasonable. This student will keep it in mind and will not do it again in the future." Only then did everyone nod in satisfaction. Chu Suiliang stroked his beard. "Since you already know, then we will not say anything more. You are still injured, so rest well." After saying this, he turned and left. Everyone saw that Chu Suiliang had left and did not stay any longer, so they all left. But when they left, they all gave Zhang Feng a meaningful look that was hard to understand. Zhang Feng was the only one left in the room. He lowered his eyebrows and glanced around. Seeing that his teachers had all left, he slowly got up. But at this moment, the door was pushed open again. Zhang Feng was so scared that he hurriedly bowed and said respectfully, "Teachers, do you have any other orders?" A voice came from in front of him, "Prince Zhang, it's us." Zhang Feng could not help but be surprised. This voice did not belong to his teachers. He could not help but be curious. He raised his head and saw that it was Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao. He said unhappily, "So it's you two girls. What are you doing here?" Zhang Yuyao chuckled. "I didn't know young Master Zhang was so afraid of you gentlemen." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Zhang Yuyao and casually found a stool to sit down. "I'm not afraid. I'm just showing my respect. I owe my master a great debt of gratitude. This time I've angered them. It's only right for them to scold me." "Prince Zhang is right." Jingshu smiled and went forward to pour a cup of tea for Zhang Feng. "Sirs, you are doing this for the good of young master." Upon hearing this, Zhang Feng's face turned a little ugly. The words that his teachers had just reprimanded him were still ringing in his ears. Hence, he waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. You guys go back to your residence first. I want to be alone." "Oh," Jingshu nodded. She could tell that Prince Zhang was not in a good mood, so she pulled Zhang Yuyao back to their residence. As for Zhang Feng, he took out a cigarette from his waist and slowly lit it, savoring this lonely life. At the same time, in the imperial study, Li Shimin sat on the dragon throne with a cigarette in his hand. From time to time, he would take a puff. His complexion was not very good. He had been exchanging letters with Xingzhou for the past few days, but there was no news about Zhang Feng. For this reason, he sent out a few more teams, hoping to find news about Zhang Feng. In fact, he did not have much hope that Zhang Feng would be alive. Thinking about it, after blowing up the Turkic camp, even if he had a flying magical weapon, he could not stay in the sky forever. Since that was the case, he would definitely land. However, until now, why was there no news? Could it be that he was already dead? Or had he been captured by the Turkic people? Or had he been eaten by wild wolves? He had thought about all these. Now, his only hope was to pick up the bones and bring them back. At least, he would have something to remember. However, at this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Then little Gizi walked in with small, quick steps. Your Majesty, there is news." He hurried over and almost stumbled. He looked very anxious. Li Shimin raised his lazy eyelids, looking slightly tired. "What news?" Little Gizi hurried forward and said with joy, "There is news about Zhang Feng." "What?" Li Shimin stood up and looked at little Gizi in shock. He could not believe it. "Is what you just said true?" There had been no news about Feng Zi for a few days. He thought that something had happened to this guy. Why was there suddenly news? Could it be that the Turkic people let him come back? Or had this guy met with a misfortune? Thinking of this, his eyes became even more excited. At this moment, little Gizi bowed and said seriously, "Your Majesty, didn't you ask me to inquire about Zhang Feng?" According to the guard outside the palace, Zhang Feng brought his family to Shao Mountain this morning. As for when he came back, I don't know. Li Shimin frowned. He felt that something was wrong. Xingzhou was at least a few hundred miles away from Chang'an. How could Feng Zi come back so soon? This did not make sense. Moreover, even if this guy came back, why was there no news before? Why did he only get the news this morning? All of this was strange. He could not help but be suspicious. "Is what you said true? Are you trying to deceive me?" Hearing this, little Gizi felt bad. How could he dare to deceive His Majesty? His legs went soft and he crawled on the ground. "Your Majesty, what I said is true." The news came from outside the palace. A guard saw Zhang Feng go to Shao Mountain. Li Shimin knew that little Gizi did not dare to deceive him. However, this news was a bit strange. How did Feng Zi come back? How did he escape the eyes and ears of Chang'an? After thinking for a while, he waved his sleeves. "Fine, I'll assume that what you said is true. Go to Shao Mountain and take a look. If I find out that the news is false, I'll come back and break your legs." Chapter 1926. Hearing this, little Gizi shuddered. In fact, he didn't know if Zhang Feng had really returned. The news came from outside the palace, and he was only a messenger. Now, he could only pray that the news was true. Otherwise, his leg. "What are you waiting for?" Li Shimin glanced at little Gizi and said impatiently, "Hurry up and help me change my clothes." Did Feng Zi really come back? He had to confirm it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be at ease. Relying on these messengers wasn't a solution. Moreover, if Feng Zi really came back, he had to check if he was injured. This was very important. Soon the clothes were changed. Just as he was about to leave, Fang Xianling, Wei Jing, and the others walked up. Fang Xianling looked at Li Shimin's plain clothes and asked curiously, "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Li Shimin waved his hand impatiently. "Aya, there's news that Feng Zi is back. I want to go take a look." Feng Zi was back? Everyone's eyes widened in surprise. They knew that Zhang Feng had been in Xingzhou. Why was he back so soon? There was no news about him. Why was he back so suddenly? Even though they didn't believe it, seeing that His Majesty was so impatient, it seemed to be true. Wei Jing stepped forward and cupped his hands. "Your Majesty, I'm willing to go too." Li Shimin was already impatient. Seeing that everyone wanted to go, he replied casually, "Do as you wish." With that, he waved his sleeves and left. Wei Zheng and the others looked at each other and followed closely. Actually, until now, They still couldn't believe that Feng Zi was back. After all, Xingzhou wasn't close to Chang. How could he be back in just a few days? Although they thought about it, they still wanted to find out. In next to no time, their group arrived at Ballista Mountain's White Deer Academy. Li Shimin hurriedly jumped off the carriage and ran toward Zhang Feng's residence. As Wei Zheng and the others were old, their legs were not as nimble, so they could only run at the back. As they ran, they shouted, "Erling, slow down." However, Li Shimin couldn't wait any longer. He rushed to the residence in a few strides and opened the door. A familiar figure was sitting on a chair, smoking. This person was naturally Zhang Feng. He was startled by the sudden voice and sat up abruptly. When he saw that it was Lao Li, he was so excited that he could not speak. Lao Li was one of his few good friends. Lao Li had helped him a lot in Chang'an city. When he was in Shenzhou, he missed Lao Li very much. Thus, he was naturally excited to see Lao Li again. On the other hand, when Li Shimin saw that it was Zhang Feng, he couldn't help but smile, as if all the grievances of the past few days had been revealed. Ever since Zhang Feng left, there wasn't a day that he didn't miss her. First, it was the Xuanwu Gate incident. Hundreds of officials forced him to abdicate. He even felt that the palace was a little suffocated. Everyone had betrayed him. At that time, he put all his hopes on Zhang Feng. Unfortunately, this guy didn't come back. However, it didn't matter. Later, there was also good news. The Turkic camp was bombed. Xieli and Tuli were injured. They all retreated to the grassland. Only then did the officials stop talking. Otherwise, he didn't know how these guys would slander him. This was all thanks to Feng Zi. Thinking of this, he strode forward and gave Zhang Feng a bear hug. He said with emotion, "Feng Zi, you're finally back. It's good that you're back." "Hee, I didn't know that you missed me so much." Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder and then stepped back. He looked at Li Shimin with joy. "How have you been these days when I wasn't here?" Li Shimin patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and smiled. "I'm fine. How about you? When did you come back? Why didn't anyone find out?" He naturally wouldn't take the initiative to tell Feng Zi about what happened in the palace. After all, it wasn't something to be proud of. "I came back yesterday." Zhang Feng smiled as if he thought of something happy. "As for why I didn't find out, it's because I have a unique skill." As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Xianling and others rushed in. When they saw that it was really Zhang Feng, they were so excited that they couldn't speak. They were also very worried about Feng Zi. After all, they had been friends for so long. At that time, they all thought that this guy died in Shenzhou. They didn't expect that he was still alive and standing in front of them. How could they not be happy? In fact, the happiest one was Xiao Gizi. Just now, when he passed the news of Zhang Feng's return to His Majesty was still doubtful. Now that it was true, His Majesty could hug his leg, right? Zhang Feng, this brat, is usually not much, but now he has become our family's savior? Thinking about it, comparisons were odious. Zhang Feng didn't know this. Seeing that everyone was stunned, he couldn't help but ask, "What? Don't you recognize me?" This voice broke the silence in the room and interrupted everyone's thoughts. Wei Jing stepped forward and looked at Zhang Feng. Not simple, not simple. From Chang into Xingzhou, and then from Xingzhou back to Chang. Boy, how did you do it? Chapter 1927. To be honest, he was very curious about this. Although he knew that Feng Zi had made something that could fly up into the sky, no one had seen it before and no one knew about it. He was not the only one who was curious. Everyone present was curious as well. Li Shimin was also curious and asked, "Feng Zi, what's going on? Tell us." Don't rush." Zhang Feng chuckled and waved for everyone to sit down. "Sit down first. I'll get the canteen to prepare some dishes. We'll talk while eating." Upon hearing this, Li Shimin swallowed his saliva and felt his taste buds begin to bloom. He had not been able to eat or sleep well in the past few days in the palace. Now that Feng Zi was back, he felt a little better. It would be great if he could freeload off the academy's delicacies. Thus, he said, "Okay, let's talk while eating." Zhang Feng was naturally happy. He turned and waved at the door to ask someone to prepare the dishes. Not long after, a few students came up with braised meat, roasted chicken, and other things. They placed everything neatly on the table, turned around, and left. Zhang Feng waved to everyone and smiled. Come, sit down. Don't be shy. Li Shimin smiled faintly and sat down near Zhang Feng. Old Wei, Old Feng, why aren't you sitting? Zhang Feng saw that Wei Zheng and the others had not sat down and asked subconsciously. Wei Zheng and the others looked expectantly at the food and wine, and then at Li Shimin. They had no choice. Without His Majesty's order, they did not dare to sit. Li Shimin naturally knew what everyone was thinking. He waved his hand and said, "Sit down. We're happy today. Don't worry about this." Then he glanced at little Gizi. "You sit too." Little Gizi looked at Li Shimin in surprise. He had wanted to sit down and taste the delicacies for a long time. His Majesty had not eaten well these past few days, so how could a servant dare to eat well? Thus, he naturally starved with His Majesty. Now that His Majesty had allowed him to sit down, this was a great gift. Without hesitation, he chose a seat close to Li Shimin so that it would be easier for him to serve food to His Majesty. When Li Shimin saw that everyone was seated, he looked at Zhang Feng and asked, "Fengzi, you haven't answered my question yet." "Don't worry." Zhang Feng picked up the wine jar and poured everyone a cup of wine. Then he picked up the wine bowl and said, "Come, let's drink first." Although everyone was curious, the wine stimulated their taste buds. Unable to resist the temptation, they clinked their cups and downed the wine. Seeing this, Zhang Feng put down the wine glass in satisfaction and looked at everyone with a proud face. "I can run from Chang'an to Xingzhou and back. It's all thanks to my hot air balloon." After saying that, he picked up a piece of braised meat and threw it into his mouth, gorging himself. Everyone was dumbfounded. What is a hot air balloon? He had never heard of it before. Is it the thing that floated in the sky of Chang'an and last time? Wei Zheng coughed softly and asked shamelessly, "Fengzi, is the hot air balloon you mentioned the one that flew in the sky of Chang'an and a few days ago?" Zhang Feng chewed 2 mouthfuls, glanced at everyone, and said proudly, "This thing is newly developed by me. It can go to the sky, no matter where it goes. Not to mention Xingzhou, it can even go to the Turks and back." No one was surprised by this answer. After all, they had seen the thing in the sky with their own eyes. But there was one thing. Could this hot air balloon float to the Turks? Wasn't this a bit exaggerated? After all, Xingzhou and the Turks were not in the same place. They should be dozens of miles away from each other. Xingzhou was just a border of the Tang dynasty. How could it be as easy as Fengzi said? If so, why did the Tang dynasty need to resist the Turks? Couldn't they just send a few hot air balloons there? Therefore, Wei Zheng, who had always been strict and old-fashioned, questioned, "Fengzi, you said that it is possible to go to Xingzhou. After all, many people have seen it. But isn't it a bit exaggerated to go to the Turks? You know, Xingzhou is still some distance away from the Turks." Everyone also felt that Wei Zheng's words were reasonable. They nodded and looked at Zhang Feng with confusion. As for Zhang Feng, when he found that his boasting was questioned, he blushed and said, "What do you know? The hot air balloon I made was supposed to go to the Turks this time. But I met Xieli in Xingzhou and taught him a lesson. Otherwise, I would have gone to the Turks and blown up these bastards." "Oh," Li Shimin nodded and pretended to be suddenly enlightened. "Then what did you do to Xieli in the end?" In fact, he could see that Fengzi was boasting. But he was too lazy to expose him. Therefore, he could only change the topic. Zhang Feng did not pay too much attention to it. The moment he heard Xieli's name, he seemed to have regained all his strength. With an excited look on his face, he said, "Let me tell you, when Chungchumo and I arrived at the Turkic camp, those fellows actually did not dodge or hide when they saw us. They even kept cheering on the ground as if they were celebrating something. This really made me mad. Why didn't those Turks run when they saw you? Didn't they know that you were going to blow them up?" Chapter 1928. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng curiously. "How would I know?" Zhang Feng was also puzzled. Then he changed the topic and said with a smile, "Speaking of this, I want to laugh. Of course, it's best for us that the Turks didn't run away. When we threw down all the gunpowder, Those guys were instantly blown apart. Minced meat was everywhere on the ground, and blood stained the whole ground. After that, he picked up the wine bowl in front of him and took a sip. Then he laughed and said, "Every time I think of this, I feel happy. These bastards have robbed the Tang dynasty every year. It's time for them to pay their debts." "That's right." Li Shimin nodded and looked at Zhang Feng with satisfaction. "Feng Zi, you've really made the Tang dynasty proud. Let's see if those bastards still dare to look down on the people of the Tang dynasty in the future." He was very satisfied. In this battle of Shang province, his side had only sent 4 people, while the Turks had thousands of soldiers. With such a large difference in numbers, they had been beaten to a pulp. It was really inconceivable. He knew the Turks very well. In the past, he had dealt with these guys a lot. These guys could be described as inhumane. They burned, killed, robbed, and did all kinds of evil. This time, they had suffered a blow, but it didn't hurt their foundation at all. What if they made a comeback in the future? Moreover, the Turks had a strong recovery ability, and their cavalry was even more fierce. What if they came to rob the border of the Tang dynasty again? Thinking of this, he quickly asked, "Feng Zi, this time you blew up the Turks, but what about next time? You know, these guys won't give up easily." Zhang Feng frowned. In fact, he also understood this. Although the Turks had suffered losses this time, it didn't affect their foundation. After a few years of recuperation, they should be able to make a comeback. At that time, the people on the border of the Tang dynasty would suffer again. This, while he was lost in thought, Zhang Sun Wuji's voice sounded. "Feng Zi, didn't you use that hot air balloon to attack the Turks this time? Can we use the same method next time?" As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Feng slammed the table and stood up. "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? The hot air balloons could fly in the air. Even if the Turks were somewhat inferior, they could only flee for their lives. There was no way for them to guard against the hot air balloons. If he could make more hot air balloons, he would be able to catch them off guard during the battle." Thinking up to this point, he glanced at the crowd excitedly. The hot air balloon is flying in the air. Even if the Turks see it, they won't be able to guard against it. Furthermore, at night, the Turks' vision will be impaired. We can definitely catch them off guard. Li Shimin nodded. "Feng Zi, what you said makes sense. However, when can you finish making this hot air balloon?" Zhang Feng was stunned. The first generation of hot air balloons had already been sacrificed. If they wanted to recreate it now, they would have to innovate. In particular, they had to modify equipment that could prevent air leakage and also install equipment that could turn. Otherwise, the danger of the hot air balloon would be greatly increased, and the losses would outweigh the gains. After thinking for a while, he said, "I still need to study the hot air balloon again. As for when it will be ready, I don't know." "What about the hot air balloon you used to go to Xingzhou?" Wei Jing asked curiously. "The one before?" Zhang Feng spread his hands awkwardly. "That one has been destroyed." Wei Zheng's eyes widened. How could it be destroyed? He remembered that this thing flew from Chang'an and to Xingzhou and then back to Chang'an and from Xingzhou. How could such a powerful thing be destroyed? This was a reckless waste of God's gift. The others also looked at Zhang Feng as if they were looking at a sinner. It was as if they were saying that he had done something very wrong. Zhang Feng couldn't stand it anymore. He waved his hand and said impatiently, "I didn't want it to be destroyed. There was an accident on the way back to Chang'an, and it was destroyed. What's the use of looking at me like this?" Of course, he couldn't tell them about the time when he was treated as a beggar. He still wanted to save face. However, the others didn't want to hear this. They only cared about the things that were beneficial to the country and the people. But on second thought, Feng Zi's contribution in blowing up the Turks was indispensable. So they fell silent. Zhang Feng saw that the atmosphere was a little awkward. He laughed and said, "By the way, I blew up the Turks this time. I still don't know how that old guy Xieli is doing. Do you have any news?" Upon hearing this, Li Shimin's interest was piqued. Xieli could be regarded as his mortal enemy. When he was in the Sui dynasty, this guy burned, killed, and looted at the border. He once led the army to fight, but in the end, nothing was done. After ascending the throne, Xieli went from bad to worse, constantly harassing the people at the border. He had always wanted to get rid of this guy, but he didn't have the chance. It was Fengzi who helped him vent his anger. Thinking of this, he picked up the wine bowl and drank it. Then he looked at Zhang Feng. This time, I have to thank you. After the battle in Xingzhou, according to the news from the Turks, Xieli lost an arm and Tuli was seriously injured. So powerful? Zhang Feng opened his eyes wide. He couldn't believe it. Chapter 1929. When he threw the explosives, he threw them at places with many people. He didn't care about Xieli at all. He didn't expect Xieli to be blown up like this and even lose an arm. In that case, Xieli wouldn't be able to ride a horse. Maybe he would even lose his position as Khan. But Tuli was lucky. He was only seriously injured. What a pity. Thinking, he said, "How's the Turks' headquarters?" Li Shimin poured a full cup of wine for Zhang Feng. He continued, ever since Xieli and Tuli were injured, the two Jue's headquarters had different degrees of internal strife. Not a few aristocrats wanted to replace Xieli. This is a good thing. Zhang Feng slapped the table. He was a little excited because he knew this was a good opportunity. The Tang dynasty should send people to rope them in. Maybe we can pull the Turks into the Tang dynasty. You know, the Turks exist in tribal form. Every tribe has its king. Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Zhang Feng, thinking that this guy's thinking was a little simple. The imperial court naturally knows this. But this internal strife was quelled by Xieli's subordinates not long after. The Tang dynasty's emissaries didn't go in at all. So that's how it is. Zhang Feng suddenly understood. Although the Turks had suffered losses this time, they were not pushovers. It would not be easy to eradicate them. Thus, he continued, although there is no chance this time, since they had internal strife, I believe that it will happen again soon. The next time will be a good opportunity. Everyone nodded, thinking that Zhang Feng's words were reasonable. The Turks were originally war-hungry and murderous. They had a wild nature in their bones. Every tribe was separated. They had their own kings and beliefs. Even the largest tribe, Xieli, was the same. He had used force to conquer the other tribes, and that was how he became the Khan. Now that this guy had lost an arm, the other tribes would definitely not accept it. At that time, there would be another great battle, and the grassland would change owners. Zhang Feng was naturally well aware of this. He glanced at everyone and said, "When I make the hot air balloon, everything I just said will be fine." Li Shimin nodded. He believed in Feng Zi's ability, so he didn't say much. He directly picked up the wine bowl and said with a smile, "After the hot air balloon is done, you have to let me try it. I want to see what's going on with that thing that can go up to the sky." "No problem, it's just a small matter." Zhang Feng took a sip and smiled. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and changed the topic. "What happened in Chang'an city recently? Why do I hear rumors about me everywhere?" Li Shimin put down his wine bowl and let out a long sigh. "Isn't this all your fault?" "Me?" Zhang Feng looked puzzled. "I've always been in Victory Prefecture. What trouble could I have caused?" Li Shimin snorted and was a little unhappy. Then, he looked at Zhang Sunwuji and said, "You tell him." Zhang Sunwuji could naturally understand Li Shimin's feelings. He was still angry about being forced to abdicate a few days ago, so he coughed softly and said, "Feng Zi, when you flew over Chang'an city that day, the people in Chang'an city thought that you were a jinx, causing the whole city to be in a panic. That's not all. You made the emperor suffer." Speaking of this, he glanced at Li Shimin intentionally or unintentionally. Seeing that the latter didn't respond, he continued, "The ministers also thought that you were a jinx, and even the ghosts of the Xuanwu Gate. So, all the officials asked the emperor to issue an edict." "What?" Zhang Feng exclaimed and widened his eyes. "This has nothing to do with me. At that time, I just wanted to go to Victory Prefecture to blow up those Turkic bastards. Now, the best way was to clear himself of suspicion so that Li Er wouldn't suspect him. Otherwise, if he was punished like this, he would probably be sentenced to death. However, the others didn't think so, because they were the culprits who forced the emperor to abdicate. The real master hadn't said anything yet. Not only that, they even looked down on Zhang Feng. Just now, he said that he would go to Victory Prefecture halfway, but now he changed his words and went to Victory Prefecture of his own accord. How shameless. However, they didn't care. After all, the real master didn't blame him. What could they say? Therefore, Zhang Sun Wuji continued, I don't mean to blame you. His Majesty did issue an edict, but the storm passed quickly. That's good. Zhang Feng patted his chest and relaxed his nervous mood. What happened after that? Zhang Sun Wuji paused and then said, later, he also prepared a sacrificial ceremony and a Waterland Conference. Waterland Conference. Zhang Feng was stunned and vaguely remembered something. Didn't Xuanzang get to know Li Er at the Waterland Conference and become brothers? Now that Li Er was going to hold a Waterland Conference, would Xuanzang participate? This guy was going to India. If he got to know Xuanzang, maybe he could get some information about India? Or maybe he could arrange a few spies around Xuanzang. When the time came, they could go to India to gather information. Thinking of this, he quickly asked, when will the Waterland Conference be held? I also want to see the world. Chapter 1930. Seems like you still have some conscience. Li Shimin snorted, then looked at Zhang Sun Wuji. When will the Waterland Conference be held? He wasn't worried that Feng Zi would see him, because there would be a lot of people. Moreover, the place where the emperor stayed was off-limits. There were tens of thousands of guards, so it was impossible to get close. Zhang Sun Wuji thought for a while, then lowered his eyebrows. I'm not sure yet, because there are a lot of rules that haven't been drawn up yet. It will probably be after the ceremony. Zhang Feng nodded. He wasn't in a hurry, since Xuanzang would surface sooner or later. Then they began to eat heartily. Before they could eat to their heart's content, footsteps came from outside the door. After a while, Yushernan and the others walked in with a gloomy face. He glanced at the dishes on the table, then looked at Li Shimin and the others. His face fell. What are you doing? He was teaching students just now, but when he heard that Li Shimin and the others were here, he knew that this guy wasn't easy to deal with. He would definitely urge Feng Zi to do this and that, so he rushed over. But when he came, he saw that they were drinking. Li Shimin was a little confused. He wanted to catch up with Feng Zi, but he didn't expect old Yu to rush in. He could only smile and say, Mr. Bosher is too polite. We heard that Feng Zi is back, so we specially came to catch up with Feng Zi. Catch up? Yushernan glanced at the dishes on the table and snorted. Why are you drinking? Li Shimin looked a little embarrassed. He didn't know how to answer Yushernan's question. Zhang Feng saw this and quickly smiled. Teacher, Lao Li just saw that I haven't seen him in a long time, so he came to see me. Drinking some wine is fine. Fine. Yushernan looked at Zhang Feng and said with disappointment, didn't you say you were injured? Are you sure it's fine? Feng Zi, are you injured? Li Shimin was a little surprised. He didn't know about this. If he had known, he wouldn't have dragged Feng Zi to drink, let alone now that he was caught by Yushernan. Zhang Feng waved his hand, not minding it at all. It's just a small injury, no big deal. Hearing this, Yushernan was a little unhappy. He snorted coldly and said, even if it doesn't matter, you can't drink. Take away all the wine now. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand towards the door. Soon, a few students came in and took away the wine jars on the table. Li Shimin, Zhang Feng, and the others could only watch helplessly. Their hearts ached, but there was nothing they could do. It was impossible to snatch the wine back, right? Until all the wine was moved away, they didn't say a word. Li Shimin saw that there was no more wine to drink, and Yushernan was also here. He had to say goodbye to Zhang Feng. Feng Zi, we'll visit you again next time. Zhang Feng naturally saw the awkwardness in the scene, so he could only wave goodbye. The group of people cupped their hands and bid farewell to Yushernan and the others. Yushernan was like an old monk in meditation, not saying a word. He had brought disgrace upon himself, so he could only leave secretly. Seeing that everyone had left, Yushernan's expression eased a little. He looked at Zhang Feng and said earnestly, Feng Zi, don't interact with these guys in the future. They're not good people. In his heart, he had already blacklisted Li Shimin. As for Zhang Sun Wuji and the others, they were treacherous ministers. Zhang Feng didn't know this. He had always regarded Lao Li and the others as good friends. How could he let others speak ill of them? However, it was different for his teachers. He still had to agree on the surface, so he said, "Yes, teacher. This student will remember." Yu Shernan didn't say anything else, because he knew that it was better to do it himself. He flicked his sleeves and left. Only Zhang Feng was left in the room. He sat on a chair, lit a cigarette, and let the smoke stimulate his brain. He thought about how to break free from the restraints of his teachers, and how to not make them angry. Time slowly passed as he thought about it. It was night. A cold wind blew, and the white birch trees in the courtyard rustled. The white snow that hung on the treetops from the day before fell, making a crackling sound. After a while, silver-white snowflakes fell from the sky, and the ground was once again covered in silver. The next day, the golden crow slowly peeked through the clouds, revealing half of its red cheeks, like a shy little kaining. The golden sun sprinkled on the ground, and the snow seemed to be covered with gold bricks. It was so bright that people couldn't open their eyes. From time to time, the mountain streams stopped these sparrows. They flew back to their nests with scattered fruits in their mouths. They even cried out happily, as if they were composing a victory movement. The loud sound of reading came from the academy. The morning reading had begun. This was the most precious time of the day. Zhang Feng was also woken up by the students on time. He washed up, ate breakfast, and went to the classroom to check on the students' homework. He didn't need to do this. With the teachers around, they could all do it. However, when he returned, the teachers said that he couldn't be lazy and asked him to continue his inspection. This couldn't be helped. He couldn't disobey his teachers. Chapter 1931. So, he came to the classroom. As usual, the students buried their heads in their books and began to read aloud without the need for others to urge them. Zhang Feng nodded pretentiously. These students made him feel at ease. He didn't need to worry about anything. His teacher was worrying for nothing. After seeing the students, he walked towards the research institute. Because of the hot air balloon incident last time, he was still brooding. Falling from the sky? It was too humiliating. Moreover, he was regarded as a child beggar in Chang'an city. Even his family couldn't recognize him when he returned home. This was simply shameful. In addition, he promised Lao Li and the others yesterday that he would let them try the hot air balloon after making it. Thinking, he arrived at the research institute in a short while. As soon as he stepped through the door, he heard cheers. "The dean is back! The dean is back!" Zhang Feng turned around abruptly, thinking that the brat had such good eyesight to recognize Lao Tzu at a glance. Following the sound, he saw a guy as thin as a monkey waving at him. Who else could it be but Pihu? He walked towards Pihu with quick steps and said with a smile, "Little guy, your eyes are quite bright, huh?" Pihu scratched his head and smiled. "I don't have any other good points, but my eyes are good." There was a hint of pride in his words. After saying that, he seemed to have remembered something and shouted again. "The dean is back." The sound was ear-piercing and attracted a large number of students in a short while. Among them were many familiar faces, including Peng Shui, Jin Kai, and the others. They surrounded Zhang Feng, cheering excitedly like a flock of sparrows. "Dean, I heard you went to Xing State this time. How was it there?" "Yeah, I heard the dean almost killed Shelly, but in the end, that bastard ran away." "Is it true?" Everyone was talking at once, discussing animatedly. To be honest, Zhang Feng liked the feeling of being the moon surrounded by stars. However, couldn't these guys talk one by one? Were they going to make a fuss now? Each one of them was more anxious than him? It was too much. He was a little annoyed and couldn't answer. He could only wave his sleeves and raise his right hand. The students were very tactful. Seeing that the dean was a little unhappy, they stopped talking. They just surrounded him and waited for him to speak. But at this moment, a familiar voice came from not far away. "Who is it? Who is talking about the dean? Am I going to break his legs today?" Immediately, Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun walked over angrily. They were just studying how to modify the hot air balloon in the laboratory so that they could give their teacher a satisfactory answer. Then, he heard a series of shouts outside the door, saying that the dean had returned. Wasn't this bullsh*t? The dean was far away in Xingzhou. How could he have returned so quickly? Therefore, the two of them rushed out in anger. But when he took a closer look, he was shocked. He was truly a benefactor, a living benefactor. Tears welled up in their eyes as they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Ma Zhou took a step forward and touched Zhang Feng's broad shoulders. His voice trembled as he asked, "Are you really my teacher? If I'm not your teacher, then are you my teacher?" Zhang Feng scolded with a smile. He could understand how these two fellows felt. Just like old Du, they were excited. The facts proved that it was true. Hao Chujun looked at Zhang Feng excitedly and said with a smile, "Benefactor, when did you come back? Why didn't you inform us?" "I just came back yesterday." Zhang Feng laughed and tried to cover up the embarrassment. Then he said, "Let's not talk about this. I have something important to tell you. Let's go to the laboratory." After that, he walked quickly to the laboratory. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun followed closely behind. But when they turned around and saw that these students didn't seem to want to leave, they said, "You can all go back. Benefactor has something to say." They didn't mean to dismiss these students. Since their teacher said that he had something important to say, it was definitely not suitable for others to hear. The students were sensible enough to leave in twos and threes. But they glanced at the laboratory unwillingly. Inside the room, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun came to Zhang Feng. They were still excited. "Benefactor, what is going on? We were worried to death." This was true. A few days ago, when the academy sent the news that the dean had disappeared, they sent the students out to inquire about the news. But they found nothing, which made them very disappointed. Now the dean suddenly appeared in front of them. They found it hard to accept for a while. This was inevitable. Zhang Feng didn't care about this. He just roughly told them what had happened. Of course, he omitted the part where he fell from the hot air balloon and was treated as a child beggar. If the students knew that he had such a side, how embarrassing it would be. After the two heard this, they looked at Zhang Feng with respect. This time, they looked at him as if they were looking at a hero. Ma Zhou couldn't hold back the excitement in his heart. He couldn't help but ask, "Benefactor, so what the outside world said is true. You really attacked the Turkic camp and injured Shili. You are really amazing." Chapter 1932. That's right. Our teacher not only dampened the Turk spirit, but also boosted the prestige of the Tang dynasty. He is indeed worthy of being our teacher. Hao Chujun nodded and gave Zhang Feng a thumbs up. Then, he seemed to think of something and his eyes flashed with pride. "But this time, we also contributed. Wasn't this hot air balloon made by me and Ma Zhou in cooperation with our teacher?" In fact, Zhang Feng was quite pleased with their words at the beginning. After all, they were praising him. There was nothing wrong with it. However, when he heard the latter part, he felt something was wrong. This guy seemed to be asking for credit. "What hot air balloon was made by you and Lao Tzu? I was the one who did it. You guys were just helping me out from the side. But now, it's all thanks to you?" Not only that, when the hot air balloon was mentioned, he remembered the embarrassing incident of being treated as a child beggar in Chang'an. Now, these two guys actually had the face to ask for credit. He frowned and pulled a long face. "You two brats, now you have the face to talk about the hot air balloon in front of me? Don't you know that the hot air balloon—" At this point, he realized something was wrong and quickly changed the topic. "Humph, the hot air balloon is not good to begin with. You still have the face to talk about it?" Hearing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were a little confused. Their teacher clearly took the hot air balloon to Shenzhou. Why did he turn around and say that the hot air balloon was not good? This was a classic example of not admitting it after putting on his pants. However, they did not dare to say this, especially Ma Zhou. He was timid and had already retreated to the side. Hao Chujun chuckled and scratched his head. "Teacher, how can you blame us for this?" Zhang Feng was unhappy when he heard this. "How can I not blame you? You don't know how to study it properly and only idle around." "Teacher, enough." Zhang Feng stopped in time and glanced at the two. "Let's not talk about this. Prepare the materials. We will start to improve the hot air balloon." Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were a little confused, but they still nodded and went to prepare the materials. At the same time, in Zhang Mansion, when Cheng Chimo and the others woke up, they discovered a problem. Zhang Feng had disappeared. Mother asterisk her, this brat couldn't have slipped away, right? Don't want to take responsibility? His injuries were all caused by this fellow. If he didn't see him now, who would he look for in the future? Moreover, they had worked together to blow up the Turkic camp. No matter how you looked at it, they would be rewarded when the time came. They had already decided to go to the battlefield, and back then, Feng Zi had promised them heavy armor. He wanted to give the insect light cavalry and turn Wei Zi into an assassin. Now that this brat had slipped away, who was he going to find to fulfill his promise? Thinking of this, they couldn't help but vent their anger. She rushed out of the guest room and wanted to settle accounts with Zhang Feng. At this moment, they bumped into Du Ziding. Cheng Chimo knew that this was the Zhang family's lackey, so he grabbed Du Ziding's neck with one hand and said fiercely, Du, where did Feng Zi go? Du Ziding was a little confused. Wasn't everything fine yesterday? Why was this group of people so ferocious today? Did old master owe them money? Or did he offend them? If that was the case, then he couldn't reveal old master's whereabouts. Thinking of this, he patted Cheng Chimo's shoulder and said earnestly, Did old master owe you money? I'll give it to you. Don't be so impatient, let the old man down first. After saying this, he moved his legs and was about to break free from Cheng Chimo's grip. Cheng Chimo increased his strength and didn't allow him to break free. He shouted, Old man, don't be so sarcastic with Lao Tzu. Feng Zi doesn't owe us money, but this fellow is even more despicable than that. Hurry up and tell me, where is he? Yes, hurry up and tell me. Du Go and Zhang Sunchong were like foxes borrowing the tiger's might to intimidate others. They were very arrogant. Du Ziding originally thought that it was just a small amount of money, but it seemed like it wasn't. Looking at these people's fierce expressions, old master must have offended them. He had never seen such a scene before. Usually, everyone was respectful when they saw him. Now that he met these people, if he had known, he wouldn't have let old master bring them back. What the hell? Although he was cursing in his heart, he was already scared stiff. His face was pale as he said with a trembling voice, Masters, how would I know where old master went? If I offended you in the past, please forgive me. Just treat it as a fart, okay? These people still hadn't said what they wanted from old master. What if they wanted to harm old master? He couldn't say it even if he was beaten to death. You won't say it? Cheng Chimo frowned and was somewhat dissatisfied. He increased the strength of his hand. If you don't say it, Lao Tzu will beat the shit out of you. Let's see if you can still be so stubborn then. After saying this, he raised his huge right palm and swung it. Du Ziding only felt his vision go black. A palm leaf fan-like palm swung over. Chapter 1933. Slap. The slap was crisp and clear. Du Ziding saw stars in front of his eyes. Before he could react, his thin and weak body fell to the ground. He felt that his old waist was about to break. Then he screamed like a pig being slaughtered. This scream quickly attracted a group of servants. They knew that it was the housekeeper's voice and rushed over with weapons in their hands. However, would Cheng Chimo let Du Ziding off so easily? He hadn't achieved his goal yet. He strode in front of Du Ziding and grabbed him again. He shouted, Hurry up and speak. Du Ziding felt a sweetness in his throat. It was as if something was moving in his mouth. He stuck his tongue out and saw a tooth fall out. He was shocked. My tooth? Cheng Chimo didn't have the time to care about this. He continued to shout, I'm asking you a question. Where did Feng Zi go? Du Ziding was really scared this time. He originally thought that he could solve this problem with money. How did it end up like this? If he had known, he would have said it earlier. Master was so smart. He shouldn't be in trouble. He thought for a moment and his body trembled. Master went to Shao Mountain. Shao Mountain? Cheng Chimo frowned. He turned around and glanced at Zhang Sun and Du Ziding. He then looked at Du Ziding and said coldly, You're not lying to us, right? I wouldn't dare. Du Ziding shook his head. Blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. Cheng Chimo turned around and gave Zhang Sun and Du Ziding a look. Then he let go of Du Ziding and ran out. The poor Du Ziding staggered. If it wasn't for the servants supporting him, he would have fallen to the ground. On the other hand, Cheng Chimo and the others bought a few horses and rushed to Shao Mountain. They first went to White Deer College. However, they didn't find any trace of Zhang Feng. This made them furious. They thought that the old fox Du Ziding had lied to them. It wasn't until they heard a group of people talking about the dean going to the research institute that they understood. Wasn't the dean Feng Zi? He went to the research institute? Thinking of this, everyone rushed back to the research institute. When he arrived at the research institute, he saw Zhang Feng leading Ma Zhou and the others in an experiment. They hurriedly went up and shouted, "Feng Zi, Feng Zi." Feng Zi frowned. Why did this voice sound so familiar? He turned around and saw that it was Cheng Chumo and the others. He instantly lost all interest because he knew that these fellows were definitely up to no good. He said with a helpless expression, "Why are you guys here? Didn't the doctor tell you to rest well?" Upon hearing this, Cheng Chumo jumped 8 feet into the air and glared at him. "You still have the cheek to say that? Why did you run away and leave us in the Zhang mansion? Tell me, do you not want to take responsibility for us?" So, Zhang Feng quickly waved his hand and rolled his eyes. "What do you mean by taking responsibility? You make it sound like Lao Tzu did something to you." After saying that, he crossed his arms and said with some dissatisfaction, "Tell me honestly, why are you looking for me?" "Hee, isn't this attitude good enough?" Zhang Sun smiled and took a step forward. It was unknown if he didn't see Zhang Feng's dissatisfaction or if he did it on purpose, but he acted as if he didn't care at all. He said shamelessly, "Feng Zi, look, we went to Shenzhou together this time and even blew up the Turkic camp. Didn't we make a great contribution?" Something was wrong? This was Zhang Feng's first reaction. When these fellows went there, each of them was more afraid than the other and almost peed their pants. Now that they were finally back, they were actually concerned about the Turkic matter. What great contribution was this? Could it be that these fellows still wanted to enter the government? That shouldn't be possible. These fellows were usually lazy and gluttonous. It was impossible for them to change today. What was going on? Thinking of this, he looked at everyone with a strange expression. "We did make a great contribution. So what?" "That's right." Du Go clapped his hands and said excitedly, "Feng Zi, do you still remember the promise you made to us in the past?" "Promise?" Zhang Feng frowned and didn't understand. What promise did he make to these fellows in the past? He couldn't help but ask, "What promise? Did you guys eat the wrong medicine? Are you trying to go back on your words?" Cheng Chumo grabbed Zhang Feng and stared at him. "Did you forget that you want to turn me into a heavy cavalry?" "Heavy cavalry?" Zhang Feng's eyes turned. His memory was a little fuzzy. He seemed to have said it before. It seemed that he didn't just promise Cheng Chumo, he also promised Buggy to turn him into a light cavalry. That's right, there was also Wei Zi. He wanted to turn this fellow into an assassin. Thinking of this, he smiled and pushed away Cheng Chumo's hand. "I thought it was something else. Isn't it just this? Then when are you going to fulfill your promise? Give me the heavy cavalry." Cheng Chumo was excited. He pulled Zhang Feng's hand and said with a smile, "Now that I have made a great contribution, it is the best time to go to the military camp." Zhang Feng didn't reply. Instead, he put his hands behind his back and looked at the sky. He seemed to be deep in thought and occasionally stole glances behind him. It wasn't that he didn't want to give it, but that he couldn't. Now that the forging workshop was making guns, where would he have the time to make these things? Chapter 1934. Moreover, even if it was made, these guys would definitely squander it all in a few days. This price was a bit too high. Now that he thought about it, why did he have to promise this? His mouth was really cheap. However, at this moment, Cheng Chumo's urging voice came from behind. "Feng Zi, why are you dawdling? Are you thinking of going back on your word?" Who the F***CK is going back on his word? Zhang Feng suddenly turned around and stared at everyone. Is Lao Tzu such a person? Really? You're not? Then who is? Cheng Chumo was a bit unconvinced and pouted. You? Zhang Feng was about to curse. Zhang Sun Chong, who was standing at the side, hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed him. He said fawningly, "Feng Zi, Iron Bowl is like this. It's not like you don't know. Why don't you just give us the things?" After saying that, he saw that Zhang Feng's expression was not right and added, "Feng Zi, don't tell me you don't have it?" Who the F***ck doesn't have it? Zhang Feng frowned and was very dissatisfied. They actually looked down on Lao Tzu and even wanted to make Lao Tzu lose points in front of the students. How could this be? He said angrily, I can't give it to you for now because Lao Tzu is now modifying the hot air balloon. Yes, the hot air balloon. We'll talk about it later. Hot air balloon? The three of them were stunned. They surrounded the equipment on the ground and looked at it. They were talking about the heavy armor just now and did not pay attention to this thing. Now that they looked at it, wasn't this the same as the hot air balloon? It was this thing that caused them to fall to the ground and be treated as beggars. Why was this guy still researching this thing? Cheng Chumo turned to look at Zhang Feng and was a bit angry. Feng Zi, why are you doing this thing again? Do you think you haven't harmed enough people? If it wasn't for this thing, we wouldn't have fallen from the sky. At this point, Zhang Feng hurriedly rushed forward and covered Cheng Chumo's mouth and quickly gave him a look. Cheng Chumo was a little confused. He looked at Zhang Feng and saw that Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were looking at him curiously, as if they were looking forward to what was to come. He immediately understood and winked at Zhang Feng. Only then did Zhang Feng loosen his grip. He let out a long sigh and corrected himself. Have you forgotten how badly this thing has caused us? What's going on now? Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Cheng Chumo and said snappily, if it weren't for these hot air balloons, would you have been able to perform meritorious deeds? Can you blow up the Turkic camp? You really have no conscience. Cheng Chumo chuckled and scratched his head in embarrassment. He knew that Feng Zi's words made sense, but he was still a little unhappy. Every time he thought of the hot air balloon falling on him, he felt disgusted. Zhang Sun was a little smarter. Seeing that Cheng Chumo had nothing to say, he laughed and said, Feng Zi, then why are you making this hot air balloon again? Don't tell me you want to blow up the Turkic camp again? Blow up your sister. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Zhang Sun and said snappily, have you all forgotten what happened last time? This time, I want to modify the hot air balloon again to avoid the danger last time, understand? Zhang Sun nodded, not quite understanding. Then he thought of something and asked, if you're making hot air balloons here, what about our heavy armor and light cavalry? Hearing this, Cheng Chumo was also interested. Yes, if Feng Zi kept making hot air balloons here, then his heavy armor would be ruined soon. Thus he quickly asked, Feng Zi, you can't do this. You can make hot air balloons in the future, and I can help you personally. Now, you have to help me make the heavy armor. Du Go also nodded. Although he didn't get a share of these things, as brothers, he naturally hoped that Tai Nyo and the others would get something. In the future, when he wanted to play, he could just borrow it. Zhang Feng shook his head disapprovingly. You don't understand. There are many problems with hot air balloons now, and they must be improved immediately. Otherwise, they won't be able to be used in the future. Moreover, I promised Lao Li to make one for him to see. When everyone heard Lao Li, they instantly understood what was going on. Feng Zi didn't know who Lao Li was, but they knew. Since His Majesty wanted to see it, it meant that His Majesty also attached great importance to it. Then, this couldn't be delayed. However, what about their heavy armor and light cavalry? Were they going to just let it go? The three of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with unwillingness. In the end, it was Cheng Chumo who spoke. Feng Zi, since you want to do this, then we have nothing to say. What about the heavy armor and light cavalry you promised us? You can't just let it go, right? Zhang Feng had a headache. Why were these guys so obsessed with heavy armor? He let out a long sigh. How about this? Let's talk about it after I finish modifying the hot air balloons. Right now, the forge is making guns. Don't worry, I'll give it to you sooner or later. When the three of them heard this, they felt that this was Feng Zi's final compromise. There was no other way. After all, His Majesty also wanted to see it, so they could only nod and agree. Zhang Feng finally let out a sigh of relief. Since there's no problem, you guys should hurry up and leave. I feel annoyed just looking at you. No, we can't leave. Cheng Chumo's head twitched, his face filled with reluctance. Chapter 1935. This confused Zhang Feng. He asked subconsciously, why? Why don't you guys leave? Cheng Chumo rolled his eyes. What if you run away again after we leave? Chang'an is so big, it's not easy for us to find you. Zhang Feng finally understood what was going on. These guys just wanted to follow him. They looked like misers, afraid that he would not give them heavy armor. But this was also good. If there was any heavy work later, he could let these guys do it. After thinking about it, he pretended to be reluctant. You guys can't stay. This is confidential and can't be seen by outsiders. Oh, we have to stay. Yes, this is the biggest concession we can make. The three of them argued until their faces were red. They were unwilling to back down. Zhang Feng saw that they were so determined and wanted to laugh. Since they wanted to stay, they could do hard work for Lao Tzu. He coughed lightly and said with a serious face, "Since you guys want to stay, you can help us later. Don't be lazy." "No problem." Cheng Chumo waved his hand, indicating that there was no problem. Then he ran to Ma Zhou. "Xiao Ma, what do you need me to help with?" Seeing that Cheng Chumo had gone to help, Zhang Sunchong and Zhang Sunchong did not want to stay any longer, so they quickly went to help. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were a little confused. They were doing a good job. Why would they need help? They looked to their mentor for help. Zhang Feng waved his hand and smiled. "Tainyo, you guys go up?" Actually, they were already prepared just now. It was almost the same as before. They just tied up the seal a little tighter. This experiment was to see what the problem was with their own eyes. Originally, he was prepared to go up. Since these three guys were here, he naturally had to go up and sacrifice himself for science. However, Cheng Chumo obviously did not think so. He thought that he was just going to help. He did not expect to go up. This time he was furious. He stepped back. "Feng Zi, are you trying to kill me? Don't you know how dangerous this thing is? Didn't you say you wanted to help?" Zhang Feng revealed a malicious smile, then glanced at Zhang Sun, Chong, and the others. "Besides, you're not the only one going up. There are these two guys as well. And us." Zhang Sun and Du Go stared at each other. They still remembered the scene outside Chang'an city. That was an incomparably miserable time, falling from the sky. They did not want to experience that feeling a second time. Therefore, he hurriedly waved his hand. "Feng Zi, we're not going. You know that our backs haven't recovered yet. You're sending us to our deaths." "Don't worry." Zhang Feng smiled. "I've improved the hot air balloon this time. There won't be any problems. If there really is a problem, I'll be waiting for you down there." Zhang Sun frowned in disbelief. Moreover, Feng Zi's smile did not seem to have any good intentions. He had just been thrown to the ground, and the shadow in his heart had not yet passed. How could he dare to go up again? He immediately refused. "No, I'm not going." Zhang Feng's face darkened. Then he glanced at Cheng Chumo and the others. "You're not going either?" Cheng Chumo smiled awkwardly. He did not want to go, but he did not want to give Feng Zi face. So he said, "Feng Zi, it's not that we don't want to go, but this thing of yours is too dangerous. Enough." Zhang Feng waved his hand and interrupted Cheng Chumo. He was a little dissatisfied. "You guys, when you came to me to ask for benefits, each one of you said nice things. Now that I'm letting you go, you're dragging me down. What, you don't want heavy armor and light cavalry?" "Heavy armor?" Cheng Chumo instantly became spirited. But when he looked at the hot air balloon, he could not help but feel afraid. However, heavy armor and falling once were more important? Obviously, heavy armor. After thinking for a while, he made up his mind. However, there was still some concern in his heart. He could not help but ask, "Feng Zi, is this thing really not dangerous?" Seeing that Cheng Chumo seemed to have changed his mind, Zhang Feng put on a smile. "Of course it's not a problem. Do you think I'm a vegetarian? Last time was just an accident. Besides, didn't the hot air balloon make a round trip last time? This time, we'll experiment in this field. We'll be back in a few minutes. What are you worried about?" Cheng Chumo's eyes turned. Seeing that Feng Zi's words made sense, he nodded and agreed. Seeing that he had convinced one, Zhang Feng turned his gaze to Zhang Sun Chong and Du Go. De Bing, Gu Zong. Ah, the two seemed to have been awakened and hurriedly responded. In fact, they were just discussing whether or not to board Feng Zi's pirate ship. Halfway through the discussion, they were awakened by Sha Kai's sudden appearance. At this time, the two of them were still a little flustered. They subconsciously asked, "What's wrong?" Zhang Feng did not care so much. He just smiled. "How about the two of you? Are you going to board my pirate ship? No, are you going to board the hot air balloon?" The two of them looked at each other and were a little flustered. After communicating with their eyes, they still could not come to a conclusion. Then they looked at Cheng Chumo. Chapter 1936. Cheng Chumo glanced back, and the two instantly understood. Zhang Sun looked at Zhang Feng. "Okay, let's go." Zhang Feng smiled. In fact, he had already guessed this result, so he said, "Okay, you guys go up now. I promise you won't be in danger." In fact, he had his reasons for saying this. The previous incident could only be considered an accident, but this time was different. The seal had been reinforced, and it would only be tested for a while. That was why he dared to let the three of them go up. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare even if he had 10 guts. However, Cheng Chumo and the other two didn't think so. They were still immersed in the pain of the previous injury, but they had no choice but to agree to Feng Zi's request. They could only reluctantly board the hot air balloon. Zhang Feng was overjoyed. He quickly called out to Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun, "Get ready to take off." When the two heard this, they put the scissors on the hemp rope connected to the bricks, ready to cut at any time. Cheng Chumo and the other two on the hot air balloon didn't feel good. They held the basket with their hands, and their faces were filled with despair. They thought that they had just been thrown last time, and now they were going to be thrown again. Why was their life so bitter? However, it was not up to them to decide. Since they had boarded the pirate ship, there was no reason to get off. With a snap, the hemp rope was cut, and the hot air balloon slowly floated up. At first, there was nothing. It was still very stable, and it felt the same as before. However, as it got higher and higher, it started to sway. This scared the three of them quite a bit, and they shouted in the basket, "Feng Zi, you King hurt me again. Help, I don't want to die." They curled up together and cried for their parents. Zhang Feng on the ground put his hands on his hips and raised his head, as if all this had nothing to do with him. In fact, he had been listening carefully. After all, they had just taken off. They didn't fly high, but the sound was very loud. It wasn't that he wasn't worried about Cheng Chumo and the others. On the contrary, he was very relieved. This time, the hot air balloon had been reinforced, and its stability was much better than before. Moreover, it was only flying for a few hours and there was no danger at all. On the contrary, these guys kept crying and shouting, and it was annoying. Just as he was thinking about it, the crying gradually quieted down. Zhang Feng glanced at the hot air balloon and realized that it had drifted away. He turned his head and glanced at Ma Zhou and the others. "Let's go. Let's go and take a look." On the other hand, Cheng Chumo and the others felt that the hot air balloon was swaying for a while, and they almost fell off. But now, they were fine. They looked at each other and let go of their hands. They leaned over the basket and looked at it. The fear in their hearts lessened. "Look over there, that's Shao Mountain. That's Chang'an City." They slowly let go of themselves as if they had discovered a new world. After watching for a while, the hot air balloon made a sizzling sound and began to descend. The descent this time was a little different from the previous time. Last time, there was a sudden leak, but this time, it was much slower, as if it was blowing air. If one did not listen carefully, they would not be able to tell the difference. The three of them were still sitting in the basket stupidly. It was only when they saw that the ground was getting closer and closer that they came to their senses. Why did it drop? Yeah, why are we almost at the surface? Didn't Feng Zi say that it would take a few incense sticks to burn? As they spoke, the hot air balloon had already descended to the ground. It landed steadily without any undulations. They quickly got down from the basket and surrounded the hot air balloon to look at it curiously. But at this moment, Zhang Feng came over with Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. "Feng Zi, why did we come down so quickly?" Cheng Chumo looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled face. Zhang Feng glanced at the hot air balloon and smiled. "What? You want to continue playing in the sky?" Cheng Chumo waved his hand. Although the hot air balloon gave him a good experience, who would dare to joke with their lives? He hurriedly said, "No, I'm just curious." Didn't you say that it would take a few incense sticks to burn? Why did you come down so quickly? Is there a problem? Zhang Sunchong and Du Go also looked at Zhang Feng curiously. However, Zhang Feng didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked around the hot air balloon a few times and finally checked the seal. He revealed an expression of sudden realization and looked at everyone. Actually, I didn't know before, but now I know. After saying that, he looked at Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun and said with a serious face, "Remember, don't use hemp rope to seal the balloon next time." The reason why it fell too quickly this time was because there was too little Chichong. Also, the gap in the hemp rope was too big. If you use hemp rope next time, it will definitely be the same as this time. Don't use hemp rope? Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were a little confused. If they didn't use hemp rope, what would they use? They wanted to ask, but when they thought that their teacher might have other arrangements, they quickly wrote it down in their notebook and said in unison, "Yes, teacher." Zhang Feng nodded and then looked at Chungchumo and the others. He asked with a serious face, "Did you feel anything unusual when you were up there? This is very serious. In the future, it may be related to human lives. Think carefully before you speak." Chapter 1937. He knew that these guys were usually sloppy. He purposely made things sound more serious to prevent them from spouting nonsense and to let them know the severity of the situation. Zhang Sunchong was smart and immediately understood Zhang Feng's meaning. After thinking for a while, he said, "When we were rising, we shook violently. I don't know if that counts." There was nothing else after that. After that, he looked at Chungchumo and Du Go. Seeing that they had nothing to add, he nodded and said, "That's all." Zhang Feng frowned and was puzzled. Why did it tremble? Wasn't it fine normally? Why was there a problem now? He walked around the hot air balloon a few times and then checked the parts one by one. When he checked the iron wire, he realized that the iron wire was not tied tightly enough. He thought to himself that these guys were really lucky. They were fine. However, this also showed that Ma Zhou and the rest were not careful. It seemed that he had to be more careful next time. Otherwise, someone might really die. As he thought about it, he glanced at everyone and finally fixed his eyes on Ma Zhou and the rest. "This is your mistake. Don't do it again. You have to check all the equipment properly. Otherwise, someone might die." Ma Zhou and the rest saw it and quickly nodded. "Yes, teacher." Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Go and prepare some candles and some thin copper wire. Remember, it must be thinner than the iron wire this time. Come and find me when you are ready." Ma Zhou and the rest were puzzled. Why did their teacher need candles? They could not use them. However, since their teacher had given them instructions, he might have other intentions. They nodded and turned to leave. Chungchumo and the rest were idlers. Seeing that they had nothing to do, they found a place to sit around a fire to warm themselves. Zhang Feng saw the commotion and came over. He cupped his hands and felt extremely warm. After a while, Ma Zhou and the rest came back with the items. "Teacher, we have the items back. What do we do now?" Hao Chujun put the items on the ground and asked seriously. Zhang Feng glanced at it and finally fixed his eyes on the candle. "Light the candle first, then drip the wax on the seal." "Drip on the seal?" Hao Chujun stared blankly at Ma Zhou. He seemed to understand a little. There was a history of using wax to seal envelopes in the military. The wax was airtight. Once it dripped onto the envelope, it would be easy to tell if it had been tampered with. Even now, the military still uses this method to seal envelopes. Could it be that esteemed teacher wanted to use wax to isolate the airflow? He thought for a moment and asked, "Teacher, are you planning to use wax to isolate the airflow?" "Not bad." Zhang Feng did not hesitate and said directly, "Since you can see it, then I will tell you. Wax water has a very good airflow isolation property, and it can also isolate water flow. It is very important in the experiment, but it is very afraid of high temperature. Once it is exposed to high temperature, it will melt. This is the reason why I used wax water this time." Both of them nodded. They could basically understand everything their teacher said. Zhang Feng smiled and glanced at the hot air balloon. "Since you understand, then let's start the experiment. Now that there is still air in the hot air balloon, drip the wax on it. Both of them nodded and lit the candle with a match and dripped the wax on the seal. At first, due to the characteristics of the silk, the hot air balloon shrank slightly. However, they got used to it quickly. After a while, the entire seal was filled with wax. Ma Zhou looked at Zhang Feng and said seriously, "Teacher, the wax has been dripped. There should be no problem." Zhang Feng nodded and did not reply. Instead, he looked at Chengchumo and the rest who were warming themselves by the fire. "Tine Yo, De Bing, Gu Chong, get up and work." Chengchumo and the rest turned around and glanced at him. Their faces were a little ugly. To be honest, they did not want to fly anymore. When this thing first came out, everyone felt that it was a novelty. Everyone wanted to go up and try it. This was understandable. However, after the fall last time, there was a shadow in their hearts. It would take some time before it could be erased. Today, they were asked to go up again. There was already a shadow in their hearts. Moreover, when the cold wind blew, they were as cold as dogs. How could they stand it? Hence, Chengchumo spoke. He looked at Zhang Feng with a pleading face. "Fengzi, didn't we just go up? Can't you find someone else to mess with? For example, your two precious disciples?" "Yes, Fengzi." Zhang Sun was also a little unhappy. He had almost frozen to death in the sky. It was not easy for him to come down and warm himself by the fire. Now he had to go up again. How could he? He frowned. "It's so cold up there. We finally came down to warm ourselves. Don't you know how to be considerate? Why don't you let those two guys go up instead?" As he said that, he pointed at Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. Du Go also acted according to the situation. He pointed at the two as if he wanted them to go up. Chapter 1938. Hao Chujun and the other two were at a loss as to what to do. They looked at Zhang Feng and were about to say something when Zhang Feng waved his hand to stop them. He smiled at Chengchumo and the others and said, "Iron Bull, I know you feel cold in the sky, but this is for science and for the Tang Empire. You have to sacrifice once. As for Ma Zhou and the others, they cannot go to the sky. Why can't they go to the sky? Are you trying to trick us?" Du Go was a little unconvinced. "Do you think they can go to the sky with their physiques?" Zhang Feng snorted and said angrily, "Besides, if they go to the sky, who will record the data underground?" Everyone looked at each other. Although they didn't know what data was, Feng Zi said it so confidently. It should be something very important. They couldn't say much. It was just that they were more or less repulsed by the idea of going to the sky. They had just been thrown down last time. No one was willing to go there again. Chengchumo said embarrassedly, "Feng Zi, it's not that we don't want to go to the sky, but it's a little too cold. Can you relax a little? Or we can go find some people?" He had already thought about it. As long as Feng Zi agreed, he would go outside and find some irrelevant people. At most, he would pay some money. However, Zhang Feng obviously didn't think so. He frowned. He hated these guys' excuses the most. He waved his hand and said, "No, you have been there before. I don't feel at ease letting others go. At most, I'll let you take some things to keep warm. Is that okay?" Chengchumo looked at Zhang Sun and the other two. Seeing that he couldn't refuse, he said, "Well, you have to prepare more." Zhang Feng nodded and then looked at Ma Zhou and the others. "You go and prepare some things to keep warm. Try to hurry." Ma Zhou and the others didn't hesitate. They turned and ran away. After a while, they came back with all kinds of quilts and cotton-padded clothes. Zhang Feng casually glanced at it and then passed it to Chengchumo and the others. "Here, the quilt and cotton-padded clothes are all yours. Put them on and go up." Chengchumo and the others reluctantly took the cotton-padded clothes and slowly boarded the hot air balloon. After everything was ready, Zhang Feng looked at Ma Zhou and the others. "Untie the ropes and take off." Ma Zhou nodded and quickly untied the hemp rope. The hot air balloon slowly rose at a speed visible to the naked eye. This time, it was much more stable, unlike the last time when it kept rising. Chengchumo and the others seemed to be used to all this. They didn't roar and just sat in the basket in a daze. The hot air balloon flew higher and higher, slowly passing through the clouds. After about an incense stick's worth of time, it finally stopped in the air. Chengchumo and the others sat in the hot air balloon, snuggling with each other. Their eyes were unfocused, as if everything outside had nothing to do with them. On the ground, Zhang Feng raised his head and glanced at Ma Zhou and the others from time to time. He said, "Remember, after using wax water to seal the hot air balloon, it's obviously much more stable. There are no more swings, and there shouldn't be any air leakage." The two of them replied with an "oh," and started writing in their books. This experiment was very important to them. Not only did it solve the problem of air leakage, but it also stabilized a lot. It was undoubtedly a huge improvement. However, they soon thought of other problems. Just now, Tainyo and the others came down because of air leakage. Now that this problem was solved by their benefactor, how were they going to come down now? The air in the hot air balloon was sealed. As long as the air was not exhausted, it would be very difficult for them to come down. Thinking about this, Hao Chu-jun quickly asked, "Benefactor, wait, how are Brother Tainyo and the others coming down? How are they going to come down?" Zhang Feng frowned. He suspected that this guy had become stupid from studying. Didn't he come down just now? Why couldn't he come down now? He replied in a bad mood, "They'll come down now the same way they came down just now." "Are you stupid? Benefactor, have you forgotten?" Hao Chu-jun's expression changed and he quickly reminded, "Brother Tainyo and the others came down just now because of air leakage. Now that you've solved this problem, how are they going to come down now?" Zhang Feng was startled. Hao Chu-jun's words reminded him, "That's right, I've already blocked this flaw. As long as the air inside was not exhausted, it would be very difficult for them to come down, unless..." He glanced at the two of them and quickly said, "Did you prepare sandbags or other heavy objects on the hot air balloon just now?" The rise and fall of a hot air balloon was related to the temperature inside the balloon. When the temperature inside the balloon was high, the weight of the balloon would decrease. When the buoyancy was lower, the balloon would rise. When the temperature of the air inside the balloon dropped, the buoyancy produced by the balloon would be lower than the weight of the balloon, and the balloon would begin to fall. However, this method could not be used in the hot air balloon that was currently being developed. Therefore, they could only rely on heavy objects, such as sandbags and other things. Because the direction of the wind at different altitudes was different, the airflow produced was also different. If they wanted to rise, they would have to throw down the heavy objects on the hot air balloon. Following the direction of the airflow, they would change their direction and altitude. Chapter 1939. If they wanted to descend, the weight of the hot air balloon couldn't be dropped. Instead, it had to be heavier. Of course, it couldn't be heavier in the air, so they could only rely on the airflow and wind direction to descend. The hot air balloon didn't have a rudder, so it had to move with the wind. This was inevitable and unchangeable. Just now, the iron bulls were able to descend safely because the hot air balloon had a slight air leak. It wasn't serious, so they could descend slowly. Now it was different. The hot air balloon's mouth was sealed, and there was no weight inside to suppress it. Who knew when they could descend? Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun were well aware of this, because they had done everything with their own hands. Now, facing their teacher's question, they were a little flustered, but they could not answer. Hao Chu-jun could only say submissively, "Teacher, I was so focused on sealing the mouth that I forgot to put the sandbag. Please punish me." Zhang Feng frowned and thought to himself, "This is bad." Without the sandbag to suppress it, the hot air balloon would definitely rise higher and higher. He couldn't care less about what he was thinking and suddenly looked up. As expected, the hot air balloon could now be seen as a shadow. What should they do? The iron bulls were brought up to the sky by the hot air balloon, and now the mouth was sealed. When would they come down? Ma Zhou seemed to have noticed something and quickly asked, "Teacher, what should we do now? Will Brother Iron Bull and the others be in danger?" Zhang Feng glanced at the sky and sighed, "There's no danger. After all, the hot air balloon has been perfected. I just don't know when these guys will come down." Hearing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun looked at each other and realized their mistake. They quickly lowered their heads and admitted their mistake. "Please forgive us, teacher. This time it's all our fault." Zhang Feng waved his hand and didn't mind. "It's not your fault. You were just following orders. The main thing is that I didn't explain it clearly to you." With that, he sighed and walked towards the fire. "You don't have to blame yourselves. Come and sit. Iron Bull and the others won't be in danger. They should be able to come down even when it's dark. Let's sit here and wait for them. Hao Chu-jun didn't hear any reproach in his teacher's words, so he casually found a seat and sat down. He glanced at the dusky sun in the sky and said, "Teacher, it's already noon. Brother Tainyo should be able to come down by now, right?" Zhang Feng looked up and said uncertainly, "I don't know. He should be able to come down, right?" As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a gurgling sound coming from his stomach, followed by a feeling of hunger. Therefore, he looked at Ma Zhou and Ma Li. "Are you guys hungry? Let's go find something to eat." Ma Zhou rubbed his belly and said with a silly smile, "If Master didn't mention it, I wouldn't have felt it. I'm just a little hungry. I'll go and find something." After saying that, he pulled Hao Chu-jun and ran away. Not long after, the two of them ran back with all kinds of ingredients. There were fish, sweet potatoes, and other things. Ma Zhou grinned at Zhang Feng. "Master, this sweet potato is something I've been looking for a long time. I used to roast it a lot. There's also this fish." Zhang Feng looked at the sweet potato in Ma Zhou's hand, and the hunger in his stomach couldn't help but rise. He swallowed his saliva and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Let's get started." Ma Zhou chuckled and his hands were already moving. Hao Chu-jun was also helping at the side. The two of them roasted the sweet potato, and the other roasted the fresh fish. Not long after, a melodious fragrance floated out, causing Zhang Feng to swallow his saliva. Time seemed to pass very quickly in winter. The sun that was hanging above their heads just now had already begun to set in the west. Zhang Feng ate the roasted sweet potato in his hand and glanced at the sky. At this glance, he seemed to have discovered something. He suddenly stood up and said in surprise, "Where did Tainyo and the others go?" Ma Zhou and Ma Li also hurriedly stood up and carefully scanned the sky. As expected, they didn't find any trace of Tainyo and the others. He hurriedly asked, "Master, what should we do now? Has Brother Tainyo disappeared?" Zhang Feng was just about to say, "Immediately chase after them," when the tip of his nose was unwillingly attracted by a fragrance. He smelled the fragrance and looked over. He saw that the roasted fish on the fire was already crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The fish was already cooked. It would be a waste if he didn't eat it. Moreover, Tainyo and the others were in the sky. They shouldn't be in any danger, right? After thinking about it, he suppressed the evil thoughts in his heart. He turned around and sat down. He looked at Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun and said, "Come, let's eat the fish first." Eat fish? Hao Chu-jun and Ma Zhou were stunned. Now that he was eating fish, he wasn't going to look for Brother Tainyo and the others? What was their master thinking? Getting rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone? Not admitting it after putting on his pants? No, they couldn't let their master go down the wrong path. Ma Zhou hurriedly said, "Master, finding Brother Tainyo is more important now. We should..." Halfway through his words, he didn't continue because he knew that his teacher definitely understood what he meant. Actually, his guess wasn't wrong. Zhang Feng indeed understood. However, how could delicious food be more important than brothers? Pay? Only for now. Chapter 1940. He coughed lightly and said with a straight face, "Think about it, we haven't eaten since this morning. How can we find Tainyo if we don't have any strength? So the most important thing now is to replenish our energy. Hurry up and eat." With that, he picked up a piece of grilled fish and started eating. Hao Chu-jun and Zhou Zhuo looked at each other and didn't know how to answer. How could eating fish have anything to do with finding people? But what their teacher said made sense. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. If they didn't eat their fill, what would they do if their legs went weak? If Iron Bull's brothers were in danger, they wouldn't be able to save them. The two nodded and silently agreed with this answer in their hearts. So, they picked up the remaining grilled fish and started eating. After eating and drinking, Zhang Feng burped and looked at Ma Zhou and Zhou Zhuo. "Are you full? Let's go find Iron Bull and the others." Ma Zhou quickly put down the fish bone and smacked his lips. "Okay." Actually, when he was eating just now, he felt a little guilty. Iron Bull's brothers were missing, but he was eating and drinking here. He really shouldn't have. However, The smell of the grilled fish made him give up on the distracting thoughts in his heart. How could food be more important than brothers? And they were the kind of brothers that smelled so good. Hao Chujun was different from him. He ate and drank as he pleased. Since his teacher was eating, what did it matter if he ate? And since his teacher had spoken, he couldn't let him down. He wiped the dust off the corner of his mouth and grinned. "Teacher, let's go." Zhang Feng nodded and stood up to look around. Then he said, "We'll split into 3 directions. I'll go east, Ma Zhou west, Hao Chujun north. If you find him, shout a few times and I should be able to hear you. If you don't find him, go south. If you don't find him in the south, come to the east. There must be one in the 4 directions." Ma Zhou and Zhou Zhuan nodded and turned to walk in different directions. Zhang Feng didn't hesitate and walked straight to the east. There were students shoveling snow on the field every day, so the snow last night wasn't very deep. However, there was still a sound of footsteps on it, like a movement. Obviously, he was not in the mood to appreciate the movement. When he thought of Iron Bull and the others, he could not help but quicken his pace. After walking for about a quarter of an hour, they vaguely saw something that looked like a tent in front of them. Not only that, there were also some flames. How could the research institute have something like this? And why does this thing look like a hot air balloon? Puzzled, he couldn't help but quicken his pace. As he walked closer, he saw 3 people sitting beside the fire. They were Chengchumo, Yangsen, Chong, and Dugo. This tent-like thing was also a hot air balloon. However, this hot air balloon seemed to be deflated at this moment, dispirited and listless. Zhang Feng was puzzled. Wasn't it sealed with wax? How could he be discouraged? He couldn't help but ask, "Iron Bull, what's the matter with this hot air balloon?" When Chengchumo heard this, he rolled his eyes at Zhang Feng. "You still have the nerve to say that? If we weren't smart enough to poke a hole in the hot air balloon, we would probably still be in the sky." What? Zhang Feng's eyes widened. Poked a hole in the hot air balloon? These guys actually poked a hole in the hot air balloon? Didn't they know how difficult it was to make this thing? They actually poked a hole in it? The veins on his head bulged. Just as he was about to curse, he suddenly thought of something. These guys didn't want to go up in the first place. If he scolded them now, what if they still didn't want to go up? He still had to rely on these guys for the experiment later. After thinking about it, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said with a gloomy face, "Can't you wait for the hot air balloon to descend on its own? Do you have to expose it? Aren't you afraid of dying?" Chengchumo raised his head and felt that the hair on his nose could be seen. "When will it descend on its own? I'm afraid we'll have to go tomorrow morning." After saying that, he seemed a little dissatisfied. Of course we're afraid of dying, but we're even more afraid of not being able to descend from the sky. That's why we poked the hot air balloon. Isn't it just some silk? At worst, I'll give you some more. Besides, we gave you so much last time. You probably haven't used it all, right? Yes. Zhang Sun rushed over and said, "Feng Zi, it's just some silk. Do you have to go so far?" Zhang Feng's face turned slightly red. He really hadn't used up all the silk from last time. At worst, he could just change it. He didn't argue and waved his hand. Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about this for now. How did it feel up there?" Chengchumo's head twitched. Obviously, he didn't want to answer. Seeing this, Dugo quickly smiled and said, "Feng Zi, the effect up there was quite good. It was much more stable, but there was no way to control the direction. You saw it yourself when you were down there." Zhang Feng nodded. Actually, he had already noticed what Dugo said. There was no way to control the direction because of the weight. There was no heavy object on top of the hot air balloon to suppress it. As long as there were heavy objects like sandbags, he believed that such a situation could be avoided. Chapter 1941. He knew the reason, but how could he coax these people to go up? He glanced at the 3 people who were sulking and fell into deep thought. But at this moment, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun ran over. "Teacher, teacher," Hao Chujun shouted as he ran. The sudden shout interrupted Zhang Feng's thoughts. He looked up and said angrily, "What's wrong?" Ma Zhou gasped and said, "Teacher, what should we do if the hot air balloon breaks?" Zhang Feng glanced at the deflated hot air balloon and replied, "You should have some leftover silk, right? Bring it over and reassemble it. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun nodded, turned around, and ran away. Cheng Chumo saw this and quickly waved his hand. Fengzi, we won't go up later. He knew that Ma Zhou was going to get the silk now to remake the hot air balloon. Once it was done, it would be better for them to go up. Now was the time to say it in advance, lest they become lab rats later. Zhang Feng naturally knew what this guy was thinking, so he had to persuade him. Tainyo, think about it. You're sacrificing yourself for science. If you succeed, the people of the Tang dynasty will remember you, and your Chen family will be proud in the future. Cheng Chumo was stunned. Why did this sound so strange? It sounded like he was going to die? Sacrifice himself? The people of the Tang dynasty would remember him? Was this a trap waiting for him to fall into? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. He quickly refused. No, I don't want the people of the Tang dynasty to remember me. Lao Tzu hasn't married yet. I don't want to die yet. Zhang Sun also seemed to understand something and quickly interjected, yes, you want to experiment on us. We're not stupid. Didn't we already experiment just now? Du Go was also about to say something, but unexpectedly, Zhang Feng was one step ahead of him. He said, that was then and this is now. Just now, I admit that I made a mistake. I didn't put the sandbag up, but it's different now. I've already prepared the sandbag. As long as you guys don't poke the hot air balloon again, I guarantee that nothing will happen. Du Go shook his head like a rattledrum, his face full of reluctance. Although I've done this a few times, it's still a little dangerous. I don't want to throw my life away. After saying that, he looked at Cheng Chumo and Li Yunhong. Don't you think so? It was as if Cheng Chumo and Lu Zilong had discussed this beforehand. They nodded in unison and even looked at Zhang Feng with disdain. This made Zhang Feng very worried. If these fellows weren't willing to go up, then who else could he find to experiment with? Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun had to record the data below. The students had no experience at all. If they went up, they might wet their pants. At the end of the day, it was still these guys. His brows furrowed and his face darkened. Iron Bull, don't you want heavy armor and light cavalry? Cheng Chumo was startled. Heavy armor was indeed something he had dreamed of. As the eldest son of the Cheng family, he had always been called a wastrel. This made him very uncomfortable. He had always wanted to get rid of this unpleasant title. His father had often beaten him because of this. However, how could it be so easy? When he met Feng Zi, he knew that it was possible. However, this family wanted him to sit in a hot air balloon. This was something that could take his life. Compared to his life, heavy armor was a little less important. He narrowed his eyes and seemed to have made up his mind. I don't want it. How can heavy armor be more important than my life? When he said this, Zhang Sun and Du Go both widened their eyes, as if they didn't know this guy in front of them. They all knew that Iron Bull viewed heavy armor as more important than his life. Now, he actually said something like this? It was hard to believe. Did this guy really not want heavy armor? They looked at Iron Bull in disbelief, but they couldn't see anything. And this guy was really good at lying. This was the conclusion that the two of them had for Iron Bull. Because they didn't believe that Iron Bull would give up on heavy armor, the only possibility now was that this guy was lying. Then, could they give it a try? With that thought in mind, Zhang Sun also said, I don't want the light cavalry either. Zhang Feng was stunned. He thought that Iron Bull might have said this on impulse, but he never thought that Zhang Sun would say the same thing. One had to know that this guy loved to urge others from behind. This time, it was completely different. He didn't urge others, but he fell into it himself. Zhang Feng had nothing to say. He could only admit defeat. Now that these two guys didn't want heavy armor and light cavalry, wouldn't he have no way to do anything to them? How could he coax them into the hot air balloon? If he went up, would he be able to do it? In fact, it wasn't a bad thing for him to go up. The hot air balloon was basically not dangerous now. It was just a matter of how it rose and fell. Moreover, he could understand the hot air balloon more directly if he went up. However, if he went up, would these guys also come up? He probed with some uncertainty. If I go up, will you guys come up? You want to go? Cheng Chumo frowned, then looked at Zhang Sun and Du Go. They seemed to be exchanging glances. Chapter 1942. If Feng Zi went up, then there would be no danger. To be honest, they were not willing to go up because they were worried about the danger. Now that Zhang Feng went up, these worries were basically eliminated. Zhang Sun understood in his heart and revealed a malicious smile. If we go up, then what about the heavy armor and light cavalry that you promised before? These words reminded Chingchumo. He looked at Zhang Feng and quickly said, "Yes, do you still honor your promise?" Zhang Feng smiled, thinking that these guys really knew how to take advantage of the situation. Just now, they said that they would not go up, but now that they heard that he was going up, they immediately thickened their faces and came. However, this was understandable. After all, he had promised these guys. He could only say, "Honor the promise, okay? Are you going up or not?" "Yes, I will fight with whoever doesn't go up." Cheng Chumo glared and raised his right hand as he looked at Zhang Sun and Ma Tao. It was as if these words were meant for them to hear. In fact, Zhang Sun was extremely happy. If Feng Zi went up, then there would be no danger. He could also get a light cavalry for free. Only a fool would not go up. He quickly raised his right hand and imitated Cheng Chumo. "I'm going too. Whoever doesn't go up, I will deal with him right now." Now, only Dugo was left. He was unwilling to go up. These heavy armor and light cavalry had nothing to do with him. Why should he go up? Although it should be dangerous up there, it was cold. Just thinking about the cold wind was enough. However, when he saw Cheng Chumo and Zhang Sun look like they wanted to eat him up, he swallowed his words of refusal. He could only say submissively, "Then let's go." Zhang Feng nodded in satisfaction. "Good, Lao Tzu did not misjudge you." As soon as he finished speaking, Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun both staggered back. They were holding silk and many sandbags. They were so tired that they were panting. Hao Chu-jun quickly stepped forward and threw down the sandbags in his hands. He panted heavily. "Teacher, I got the things back." Zhang Feng nodded and glanced at the materials. "Start preparing now. You must be quick." After saying that, he glanced at the setting sun. Time passed very quickly in winter, and it was almost Yushur hour. He estimated that it would be dark soon, so he had to speed up. Thus, he looked at Cheng Chumo and the others. "You guys work together and try to finish it before dark." Cheng Chumo and the others didn't say anything and hurriedly went to help. In a short while, the hot air balloon was remade. Ma Zhou looked at Zhang Feng and said seriously, "Teacher, the hot air balloon has been prepared. This time, I have checked it 3 times. There is absolutely no problem." Zhang Feng nodded. Then he pointed at the sandbags on the ground. "Put the sandbags there. Put as many as you can. If there are any other heavy objects, you can put them there too." Ma Zhou and the others nodded and put all the sandbags up one by one. Only then did they stop. Zhang Feng saw everything clearly from the side. Seeing that there was no problem, he took the lead and walked up the hot air balloon. Then he looked at Cheng Chumo and the others. "You guys come up too." Cheng Chumo and the others saw that there was no problem and that Feng Zi had also gone up. Only then did they slowly step onto the hot air balloon. Zhang Feng glanced at Ma Zhou and said, "Untie the hemp rope." Ma Zhou nodded and immediately untied the hemp rope. Soon, the hot air balloon began to slowly float up. It was unknown whether it was because of the sandbags or other reasons, but the rise this time was particularly slow. Cheng Chumo and the others no longer had the fear from before. It was as if with Feng Zi as a protective talisman by their side, there was nothing to be afraid of. They each leaned on the edge of the basket and admired the beautiful underground scenery. Zhang Feng was not so leisurely. This time, he went up to record the approximate deviation of the hot air balloon's rise and fall due to the airflow, so as to avoid accidentally drifting far away next time. The hot air balloon rose higher and higher, slowly passing through the clouds in the sky. After a quarter of an hour, it stopped in the air with very little shaking. Zhang Feng stood up and glanced down. The beautiful scenery was in his eyes, but he still did not stop writing. "Iron Bull, how far do you think we are from the ground now?" He turned to look at Cheng Chumo and the others. In fact, he had a rough idea in his heart, but he was still a little uncertain, so he wanted to ask these guys. Cheng Chumo raised his head and was a little puzzled. "Are you full?" Why do you care about this? Zhang Feng did not like to hear this. The height of the hot air balloon was related to the gas inside. If there was more gas, it would be easier to rise higher, and if there was less gas, it would be easier to fall faster. This guy had such an attitude towards such an important matter? And most importantly, the hot air balloon could be used in the military and agriculture in the future. Height was very important. However, it was a little difficult to explain to these guys, and he did not intend to do so. He waved his hand and said with a serious face, "Don't worry about what I'm doing. First, how far are we from the ground?" Chang'an curled his lips and was a little impatient, but he still glanced at the ground and said slowly, "This should be 2 miles." After that, he looked at Zhang Sun and raised his eyebrows. "Bug, what do you think?" Chapter 1943. Zhang Sun obviously did not have much interest in this question, but seeing that everyone was discussing, he could only glance at it and reply, 2 miles it is. "I don't think so." Du Go crossed his arms in front of his chest. He seemed to have a different opinion. He also looked down and curled his lips. "I think 1.5 miles. Zhang Feng nodded and did not refute. He recorded everything everyone said in his notebook. These were all important data. Even if they were 1.5 miles above the ground, the hot air balloon had stopped moving in the air. This meant that the hydrogen this time could only support the weight of 4 people, and it was 1.5 miles above the ground. If they wanted to fly higher next time, they would need to add more hydrogen, at least more than this time. This way, they could basically guarantee that they could fly higher than this time. This could be used in the military. On the other hand, if they wanted to fly lower, they could add less hydrogen, at least less than this time. That way, they could fly lower than this time. This way, they could use it for agriculture. After recording everything, Zhang Feng was just about to speak when a gust of cold wind blew. Feeling the chill, he quickly said, "Throw 2 sandbags down." Chang'an and the others had made hot air balloons before, so they naturally knew what the sandbags were for. It was nothing more than to lighten the load and use the wind to change the direction of the balloon. Knowing this, each of them threw a sandbag down. As the weight of the hot air balloon decreased, the cold wind blew and its direction slowly began to change. Soon, the hot air balloon began to make a sharp turn and floated down. Zhang Feng sat in the basket, holding a pen in one hand and a notebook in the other, recording the wind direction and the speed of the hot air balloon's deviation. Chang'an and the other 2 snuggled together. This time, it was strange that they did not shout. Perhaps it was because they were curious. The 3 of them stared closely at Zhang Feng's notebook and were somewhat puzzled. Zhang Sun could not help but ask, "Feng Zi, the wind is so strong. What are you writing in that notebook of yours?" Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Zhang Sun Chong. "What do you know? Lao Tzu didn't record and experiment again and again. How many times could you survive? I'm afraid there aren't any left." After that, he ignored the 3 of them. However, his words made Zhang Sun, Chong, and the others feel uncomfortable. Did he really think that Lao Tzu was a lab rat? The last experiment? Resentment was resentment, but on second thought, this kid was still a responsible person. He even knew how to record it down and wouldn't do any useless experiments. With that thought, Du Go looked at Zhang Feng and asked, "Feng Zi, what are you recording? Take it out and let me have a look." Zhang Feng frowned. He put down the pen in his hand and glanced at the 3 of them. "You don't understand. It's useless even if I show you. If you have the time, why don't you see how far we are from the surface?" Du Go nodded and did not refute. He glanced down and said in surprise, "We're almost there. It's less than half a mile." As soon as he said that, Chang'an and Zhang Sun Chong stood up and looked down. Sure enough, they were not far from the surface. They cheered, "We're here. We're almost there." Zhang Feng glanced at Chang'an and the others. "We're here. What's there to be surprised about?" Chang'an was deflated. He glared at Zhang Feng and did not say anything. He cheered with Zhang Sun Chong and the others. After about the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the hot air balloon swayed as if it had hit something. Zhang Feng quickly got up and glanced down. It turned out that they had reached the surface. He was about to ask Chang'an and the others to get down. Unexpectedly, these fellows were even more enthusiastic than him. The hot air balloon had just touched the ground when these fellows had already jumped down. Zhang Feng shook his head and smiled. He slowly walked down from the hot air balloon. As soon as he came down, Ma Zhou ran over. He looked at Zhang Feng expectantly. "Teacher, how is it just now? Is there any important news?" Zhang Feng handed the book in his hand to Ma Zhou and said with a serious face, "Just now, we were about 1/2 mile to 2 miles in the sky. This is related to the hydrogen you injected into the hot air balloon. Remember, if you want to fly higher next time, you have to inject more hydrogen and put less sandbags. If you want to fly lower, inject less hydrogen and put more sandbags. Understand?" Ma Zhou handed the book in his hand to Hao Chujun and nodded. "Understood, teacher." Hao Chujun also nodded, indicating that he understood. Zhang Feng glanced at the sun in the sky. Seeing that the sun had set and the surroundings were starting to fog, he looked at everyone. "That's all for today. If there's anything else, we'll talk about it later." Chang'an and the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. The experiment was finally over. There was no need to suffer. They kept cheering as if they were celebrating something. The corner of Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, "Is it so torturous to sit in my hot air balloon? These fellows." With that thought, he turned around and prepared to leave. At this moment, Hao Chujun spoke. He said with some disappointment, "Teacher, are you still coming tomorrow?" "I won't be coming tomorrow." Chapter 1944. Zhang Feng blurted out without thinking. There was no problem with the hot air balloons now. As long as they continued to produce them, they just had to keep up with the rest. However, Ma Zhou did not think so. His teacher had just returned and stayed for a short while. Why was he leaving again? Thus, he tried to persuade him to stay. "Teacher, the problem of the hot air balloons has not been solved yet. Are you not coming back?" Zhang Feng smiled faintly as if he had seen through Ma Zhou's thoughts. "There is no problem with the hot air balloons now. Continue to produce them according to what I said today. It will be of great use in the future. As for the future, I will come to see you often." Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun looked at each other. Seeing that the latter did not speak, he could only say, "Yes, teacher." Zhang Feng nodded in satisfaction. Then he looked at Chang'an. "What about you guys? Go back to the Zhang mansion?" "I'm not going back. I want to follow you." Chang'an immediately interrupted and said aggressively, "If you leave, who will we ask for the heavy armor?" He had already thought it through. He had made such a great contribution this time. If this kid did not give him the heavy armor, he would follow him all the time, even if it meant eating. Obviously, Zhang Sunchong had the same idea. He frowned and said, "That's right. Don't even think about running away. Unless you give it to us, we will follow you all the time. We will eat and drink your Zhang family's food." Du Gohe did not have such thoughts. However, these two guys had such an attitude. He felt that it was not good enough if he did not say anything. Thus, he curled his lips and said reluctantly, "Yes, I will follow you too. Not for anything else but for Iron Bowl and Buggy." As soon as he said this, two burning eyes looked over. It was Chang'an and Zhang Sun. In fact, the two of them did not expect this guy to be so determined. Now, it seemed that he was really a good brother. However, Zhang Feng was bitter. He smiled bitterly. "You guys are really sticky candy. I can't get rid of you even if I want to. All right then, I am going to the academy. You guys can come if you want." After that, he looked up to the sky and sighed. He turned and walked toward the academy. Chang'an and the others looked at each other and naturally followed closely behind. Now that things had come to this, they naturally could not let this kid go. Zhang Feng walked in front and glanced back from time to time. He found that these guys were really following him. He had a big headache and couldn't help but speed up, trying to get rid of these annoying guys. However, how could Chang'an and the others fall for this? Seeing Zhang Feng quicken his pace, he hurriedly chased after him. Zhang Feng returned to the academy in silence. Some students greeted him, but he was not in the mood. He hurried back to his residence and bolted the door, ignoring everyone. Chang'an and the others hurried and finally arrived at the residence. They were panting heavily, and without saying anything, they went up and called out, "Feng Zi, open the door." Don't think that you'll be fine if you hide inside. If you have the ability to make a promise, then you have the ability to give me something. Zhang Feng was irritated by the loud shouts. He lit up a cigarette and smoked silently. He thought to himself that this could not go on. It was better to go to the workshop tomorrow morning to find something for these guys to play with. Otherwise, it would not be good for them to keep pestering him. Just as he was thinking, the shouting outside grew louder. Zhang Feng could not stand it anymore. He threw away the cigarette butt in his hand and shouted at the door, "Stop King quarreling. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow." After that, he turned over and got into bed angrily. He did not even take off his clothes. He stuffed the blanket over his head and pretended not to hear the voices outside. Outside the door, following Zhang Feng's shouting, Chang'an waved his hand and signaled Zhang Sun and the others to shut up. Zhang Sun was also smart. He quickly stopped and looked at Chang'an impatiently. "Tainyo, what did Feng Zi just say? Did you hear it?" Chang'an did not answer. He put his ear on the door as if he was listening for something. After a while, he looked at Zhang Sun Chong and Zhang Sun Chong and said seriously, "Feng Zi should be saying that he will give us the things tomorrow and asked us to find a place to sleep first." Zhang Sun frowned as if he did not believe it, because he knew Feng Zi well. How could this guy let go so easily? But he did not hear it clearly, so he looked at Dugo. "Debing, did you hear what Feng Zi said just now?" Dugo raised his eyebrows and smiled as if he was the most reliable. "I heard Feng Zi say that if you guys continue to quarrel, he would break your legs. That's all." Zhang Sun frowned again. According to Feng Zi's personality, it was very likely that he would say something like that. But these two guys each said something different. Who should he listen to? He said with some doubt, "Can you two be sure? What did Feng Zi say?" Chang'an looked at Dugo and was puzzled. Could this guy be right? Actually, he was just guessing, so he was not sure. But no matter what Feng Zi said, he would not leave. Chapter 1945. Thus, he made up his mind. No matter what this bastard says, we have to give him the thing. We'll wait here today. Anyway, it's already dark and he can't go out. Tomorrow morning, we'll ask him for the thing. What do you think? Zhang Sun looked at the dark sky and seemed to have made a decision. He nodded. That's right. It's already dark and we can't go down the mountain. We'll wait here for this kid and ask him for the thing tomorrow. Dugo felt that he had boarded a pirate ship, but it seemed like he couldn't get off now. He could only nod reluctantly. After making up their minds, the three of them didn't say much. They found an empty space near the door and sat down. Time passed by bit by bit. The fog started to rise and the air was moist, making people feel cold. They didn't know what was going on tonight. Perhaps the heavens were looking at these guys. It didn't snow, but layers of fog passed through, making people shiver from the cold. Chang'an and the other two also seemed to feel the cold. They hugged each other tightly to keep each other warm. However, it didn't seem to be of much use. They were still shivering and their lips were a little blue. They wanted to sleep, but the cold seeped into their bones, making it impossible for them to sleep. Chang'an opened his blue lips and said with a trembling voice, Brothers, why don't we start a fire?" "Fire?" Zhang Suan's eyes lit up. It was so cold now. The only way was to start a fire. He blurted out, "Let's go and find firewood." After saying that, the two of them supported each other and ran away. Dugo was a little slow on the uptake and hurriedly followed. The academy had basically been cleaned up, so it was difficult to find firewood. However, these guys had found some dried grass and branches from somewhere, and they were all green. After striking flint for a long time, they finally started a fire. They huddled together and cupped their hands. They felt waves of warmth and were satisfied. Finally, they snuggled together again. However, it was much better this time. There was no coldness. Soon, the three of them hugged each other and fell asleep. Just like that, the night passed. The next day, the sun slowly rose, and the golden sunlight shone on their faces. Chang'an was the first to open his eyes. He felt something strange in front of his chest. He glanced at it and found that it was Zhang Sun who put his hand on his chest. He quickly pushed it away and shouted, "Insect, what the hell are you doing?" With this roar, Zhang Sun Chong was startled. He suddenly sat up and looked around. Who? Chang'an looked at Zhang Sun angrily and slapped him. Mother asterisk cur, it's me. Zhang Sun covered his face and looked at Chang'an with an aggrieved expression. Iron Bull, why the F asterisk CK did you hit me? Chang'an was stunned. Could it be that this fellow had forgotten everything that had happened just now? He sighed and thought that the heavens were unfair. Then he looked at Zhang Sun and tried to comfort him. Insect, you were having a seizure. Lao Tzu hit you to wake you up. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and quickly said, let's go and find Feng Zi. Zhang Sun was still thinking about what had happened just now. Was he having a seizure? How was that possible? However, when he heard Feng Zi, he immediately threw this matter to the back of his mind and said to Chang'an, Iron Bull, wait for me. After saying that, he was about to leave when he found someone hugging his leg. He looked down and saw that it was Dugo. This guy's eyes were closed and he was still drooling. He was obviously still sleeping. Zhang Sun was furious. He raised his other leg and kicked him. You dog, wake up quickly. Lao Tzu and the others are going to do something important. You're still sleeping? Dugo's body curled up in pain and he instantly woke up. He said angrily, that dog kicked Lao Tzu. When Zhang Sun saw that Dugo was awake, he didn't care whether he was in pain or not. He grabbed him and ran towards Zhang Feng's door. Just as he reached the door, he saw Chang'an knock the door open and rush in. Zhang Sun Chong also hurriedly followed. When they reached the bed, they all stopped in their tracks. They saw that Zhang Feng's eyes were closed and he was snoring. It was obvious that he was still sleeping soundly. Chang'an couldn't stand it. Lao Tzu was freezing outside, and you were sleeping inside? Therefore, he lifted the blanket and shouted, Feng Zi, get up quickly. Zhang Sun didn't hesitate. He pulled Zhang Feng's arm and shook it. He shouted, Feng Zi. Feng Zi. Dugo was still in pain, but when he saw Zhang Feng and heard the shout, he seemed to wake up a lot. Even the pain lessened. But there was someone more pitiful than him. Zhang Feng was stimulated by the noise and finally couldn't stand it. He opened his eyes and stared at everyone. Are you looking for death? You want to come in when Lao Tzu is sleeping? Zhang Sun laughed and let go of Zhang Feng's right arm. Feng Zi, we had no choice. It was too cold outside, so we came in to avoid the cold. Yes, Feng Zi, to avoid the cold. Chang'an smiled awkwardly and deliberately shivered. You don't know how cold it was outside your door last night? Chapter 1946. What? Zhang Feng's eyes widened in disbelief. You guys stayed outside for the whole night? The weather was so cold these few days, and these guys actually stayed outside for the whole night? Were they looking for death? Chang'an didn't think much of it and patted his chest. It's just one night. With my physique, there's naturally no problem, but Debing is in trouble. Look, Debing's legs are frozen. As he spoke, he pulled Dugo over and said with a smile, Come, walk a few steps for Feng Zi, see if he's frozen? Dugo looked aggrieved and Chang'an walked a few steps, and it looked like it was really the case. Zhang Feng looked at Dugo in confusion. How was this F** King Frostbite? This was clearly from being beaten up. However, these guys said that they stayed outside for the whole night, and even said it so seriously, it didn't look like it was fake. Moreover, these guys had some white frost on their heads, and it didn't look like it was fake. Now he was convinced. These guys really didn't care about their lives for the heavy armor. Forget it, he'd better find something to send them off. Thinking about it, he glanced at everyone and said, all right, we'll go find it later, okay? Chang'an's face lit up and he hurriedly said, okay, then we, don't be happy too early. Zhang Feng immediately interrupted and waved his hand. The thing shouldn't be made yet, we can't be sure if we can find it. Now he had to give them a heads up, or else these guys would definitely not let it go later. Sure enough, his words instantly made everyone's hearts turn cold, as if they were splashed with cold water. However, Chang'an didn't seem to take it to heart, and said casually, all right, what's with all this nonsense, we'll know when we get there. Zhang Feng nodded and didn't say much, turning around and getting off the bed, walking towards the door. As he walked, he said, let's go eat something first, we'll go find it later. After that, he didn't care about their reactions and walked straight to the cafeteria. In fact, Zhang Sun, Chong, and the others were already hungry. When they left Zhang Mansion yesterday, they didn't eat a single bite. When they arrived at the research institute, they were dragged to be lab rats. Their stomachs were already numb. This was especially true for Chungchumo. This guy had a huge appetite. Usually, he would not be full without some food. Yesterday, he was already hungry when he was doing the experiment. However, in the end, his stomach no longer felt hungry, so he did not feel hungry anymore. Now that he heard about eating, it was as if his primitive desire was awakened. His eyes began to turn green. Without waiting for Zhang Feng's instructions, they rushed to the cafeteria one after another. "Boss, give me your braised meat, roasted chicken, roasted duck, and steamed buns." Chungchumo randomly found a seat, waved his hand and shouted at the boss. When the boss heard this, he realized that this wasn't a meal. This was clearly a robbery. Just as he was about to step forward to speak, he saw Zhang Feng walk in from the door. He quickly went up to him and said with a smile, "Director, you're here. What would you like to eat today?" Zhang Feng did not immediately reply. Instead, he glanced at Chungchumo and the others and winked at the boss. "Give them all the food they ordered. Put it on my tab." He heard Chungchumo's roar before he entered the door. Although these guys were a little overbearing, they were still his brothers. Since they came to the academy, he could not treat them badly. Besides, this was his own fault, so there was nothing to say. The boss looked deeply at Chungchumo, nodded and left. Soon, the food was served one by one. Chungchumo's eyes turned green when he saw this. He threw the chopsticks aside, grabbed the food with his hands and stuffed it into his mouth. He said while stuffing, "Feng Zi, you're so kind. You know I'm hungry." Zhang Feng looked at Chungchumo with disdain. Like Lao Tzu, like Sun. This guy ate the same way as old Ching, directly holding the food in his hands. However, he could not say this. He smiled and said, "Well, eat as much as you want." In his heart, he thought, "I hope you don't bother Lao Tzu when you're full." Zhang Sun Chong and Du Go were somewhat educated. At first, they ate slowly with chopsticks. Later, perhaps they were not satisfied with this way of eating, or perhaps they were envious of Chungchumo, so they directly stuffed their hands into their mouths. However, these two guys usually did not have a big appetite. How could they eat so much food? Moreover, after being hungry, they started to vomit. Seeing this, Zhang Feng had no appetite at all. He had no choice but to open another table to avoid being tormented by these fellows. The meal was finally over. Chungchumo patted his round belly, looking very satisfied. "Feng Zi, thank you for your hospitality this time. Next time we go to Chang'an, I'll entertain you. Now, should we go find something?" Zhang Feng glanced at Chungchumo unhappily. "Wipe the oil on your mouth first." After that, he turned and left. Chungchumo rolled up his sleeves and casually wiped his mouth. He hurriedly chased after him. "Feng Zi, wait for me."